Councillor Fad, if I can have you take your seat. We are live. So I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. I'd like to thank the media for reporting on and broadcasting our meeting, and I will have the clerk begin the meeting.
Under agenda item 1, adoption of minutes, a motion by councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth that the minutes of regular council meeting of May 14, 2018 be approved.
All in favour? Carried.
Declarations of pecuniary interest. Councillor
Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw 2018-110 and consent agenda item 6.8, parking on private property, spouse employed police services.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 6.7, which is the Fox Run development. One of the parties involved is client of the law firm at which I work. 7.7.1, the planning matter for 1188004 Ontario Inc. is a client of the law firm. And 7.8.2, the shareholder meeting, one of the parties affected is client of the law firm at which I work.
Okay. Anybody else? No. Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 4, a motion by councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth resolved that the agenda for May 28, 2018 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favour? Carried.
And under agenda item 5.1, Queen Street Cruise, Joe Bisceglia and Gary Trembinski, co-chairs, are in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. Bisceglia and Mr. Trembinski.
Thank you.
Yes. It's nice to see something that started during the term be successful and return frequently during the term. I think this is your third attendance and the first time you came in leather jackets with some music.
Yeah, we were really hip back then.
Yeah.
It's amazing how time changes us, though, eh?
We're good.
We're going to start off with a little video here.
Yeah. The announcement is that we wanted to have John Travolta come with the cast of Grease, but our budget was rather limited. I think you're aware of what limited budgets do, so you'll have to settle for Gary and I and the old clip that we showed you the second time around.
I'd like Mayor and Council to look at this video and it's a great video. It's about Sault Ste. Marie, and it's the success story of our cruise. And we'll play the video now and just watch the people's faces and how many smiling people were there.
Hypnotizing, mesmerizing me. She was everything I dreamed she'd be. Sweet surrender, what a night.
Thank you very much. What a night it was for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having us. We're so proud to be back for the 3rd annual Queen Street Cruise Festival. This is something that is really starting to snowball and take on to effect. At this point, we have most of the major dealerships involved. I'm going to start in no particular order. We have Maitland Motors, Prowse Motors, we have Toyota and Mazda, we have Superior Dodge and World Cars. Those people behind you as sponsors is a huge thing. We also have other sponsors, Frankie's Automotive and the two A&Ws, as well as Raker Hydraulics. We just want to thank you for your support, and we want to tell you that we are continuing to build. We have registers coming from the United States, Sudbury and Thunder Bay so far. This is getting bigger and bigger each year, and we're trying to build a tourist attraction for Sault Ste. Marie, and it is coming. It's coming. So get out and help us support it this year, June 15th and 16th. It's going to be a lot of fun. Joe, do you have anything to add?
I'm glad that we mentioned the date, the 15th and 16th, and I'm sure we left out some of the sponsors, but I urge people to go on our website, thequeenstreetcruise.com, for full particulars of all of our sponsors. What I'd like to add is that this year, as in the last year, we're trying to raise funds for Arch. So any and all registration money goes to Arch. This year we're going to sell T-shirts, we got beverage and food stands, and I think it's going to be much better. The only thing that's unpredictable is the weather. So if that cooperates, I think it should be a great success. And again, thank you to city staff, all of the people at City Hall, and the councilors for supporting us. Thank you very much.
Great. And thank you, gentlemen, for your work and your volunteerism. I know it takes a lot of time. So everybody who supported you and helped you, we appreciate it. June 15th and 16th, Queen Street Cruise, queenstreetcruise.com. So we encourage everybody to get out and support that.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you.
Under Agenda Item 5.2, June is Recreation and Parks Month, and Virginia McLeod, the Manager of Recreation and Culture, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Ms. McLeod.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. June is Recreation and Parks Month. And we're really excited about all the opportunities we have to offer in Sault Ste. Marie. Recreation provides multiple pathways to well-being for individuals, communities, and for our built and natural environments. Play isn't just games, and it's not just for children. Play is crucial for social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and civic development of youth. Play is not just essential for kids. It is an important source of relaxation and stimulation for adults as well. Play could be a game of frisbee, making pottery, skipping stones. It could be a walk in the park or just dreaming on the lawn. It's all about shaping, learning, and inspiring. In Sault Ste. Marie, we're extremely fortunate. We have so many opportunities for play. We have 74 park locations, 4 sport complexes, 4 community centers, 2 senior centers, outdoor pools, and the Hub Trail. So the number of possibilities are limitless for what you can do in our community. Recently, we were successful in a grant application with the Ontario Sport Recreation Communities Fund for 2018 and 2019. The project is to Stay Active and Healthy for Life initiative. We believe that physical literacy is the key to being active for life. Sault Ste. Marie citizens' quality of life is directly tied to an individual's lifelong engagement in recreation, physical activity, and sport. Developing and maintaining physical literacy throughout the years will help individuals to participate in physical activities and gain associated health benefits and maintain their independence. The Stay Active and Healthy for Life initiative will develop and implement a portfolio that supports the overall delivery of municipal recreational programs and services that are going to support our citizens to age with confidence. We also have a number of events that are going to be taking place through the month of June. Coming up on June 10th is the 2018 Trail Fest. Last year, over 300 people participated, and it's taking place at Hiawatha and is being sponsored by the Sioux Cycling Club. It's a celebration for all things bikes and trails. So where they're inspiring people to get outside, have fun in the outdoors, and enjoy the trails in Sault Ste. Marie, as well as an opportunity to promote local businesses and opportunities that exist. Other events that are coming up, on June 21st is Go Skate Day. We also have a Junior Gardeners Club at the Old Stone House, where children ages 8 to 14 can enroll. They have a giant pumpkin contest each year. They work with kids in the kitchen, where they harvest the produce and learn how to cook it, as well as a special junior club activities throughout the season. And on June 1st, we're going to be having the John Rosewell Hub Trail Festival, July 1st, the same day as Canada Day. That starts at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., so we invite everybody to get out, get active, and use our trail system to come down to Canada Day. So we encourage our citizens to get out and get active and explore all the opportunities that Sault Ste. Marie has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proclamation here, Ms. Cloud. A very long one at that.
Sorry.
Whereas in Sault Ste. Marie, we are fortunate to have a variety of recreation and park systems providing countless recreational opportunities for residents and visitors from around the world. And whereas recreation enhances quality of life, balanced living, and lifelong learning, helps people live happier and longer, develop skills and positive self-image in children and youth, develops creativity and builds healthy bodies and positive lifestyles. And whereas recreation participation builds family unity and social capital, strengthens volunteer and community development, enhances social interaction, creates community pride and vitality, and promotes sensitivity and understanding to cultural diversity. And whereas parks, open space, and trails provide active and passive outdoor recreation opportunity, help maintain clear air and water, and promote stewardship of the natural environment. And whereas the benefits provided by recreational programs, facilities, services, parks, and open space reduce healthcare and social service costs, serve to boost the economy, economic renewal and sustainability, enhance property values, attract new business, increase tourism, and curb employee absenteeism. And whereas all levels of government, the voluntary sector, and private enterprise throughout the province participate in the planning, development, and operation of recreation and parks programs, services, and facilities. And whereas Ontario has designated June as Recreation and Parks Month and annually recognizes and celebrates the benefits derived year-round from quality public and private recreation and parks resources at the local, regional, and provincial levels. Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of City, Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of June as Recreation and Parks Month. Thank you, Virginia.
Under Agenda Item 5.3, Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Awareness Month, Troy and Annette Chandler are in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Troy.
Thanks, Christian.
It's nice to see you again this year.
What's that?
It's nice to see you again this year.
You guys too.
Troy was my very first boss at what was then the Stell Hotel, now the Holiday Inn Express. And it was 1989? 1989.
Yep.
Well.
Mayor Christian, members of council, everyone here, and those watching from home, good afternoon. My name is Troy Chandler, and I'm here with my wife, Annette. Annette and I have been representing Sault Ste. Marie for Hydrocephalus Canada since 2010 to offer local support for all individuals whose lives have been affected by either hydrocephalus or spina bifida. Thank you for taking the time to proclaim June 2018 as Hydrocephalus and Spina Bifida Awareness Month. We are truly honored. And like you said to Gary, when Gary's group was here about seeing familiar faces, Annette and I've had that same feeling here. It's almost like the walk has grown up here in council, and it's a really nice feeling. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. Hydrocephalus and spina bifida are complex conditions, and unless you know someone who has them, it's pretty much unknown. There is no cure for either of these two conditions that result in varying degrees of disability. Physical and social barriers, medical complications, learning disabilities, and financial burdens are some of the challenges that individuals with spina bifida and hydrocephalus and their families must face every day. I was diagnosed with hydrocephalus in 1994 at the age of 28. The unpredictability of the condition has caused lots of emotional strain on my family throughout the years. Annette and I were determined to see if there were others in the Soo with either of these two conditions for mutual support. Our mission was clear. We are committed to making a positive difference in the lives of those affected with the daily challenges brought on by these conditions. Our first step towards reaching our goal led us to Hydrocephalus Canada, formerly the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Association of Ontario. They are a registered charitable organization proud of its 45 history of delivering programs and services that improve the quality of life of children, youth, and adults with hydrocephalus and spina bifida through research, awareness, and advocacy. We are happy to say that the statistics have shown a significant decline in spina bifida. However, there is a rise in the number of individuals developing hydrocephalus. June is our month to highlight the importance of our cause. In 2012, we organized the first Troy's Trail annual walk to raise awareness on these complex neurological conditions. We're a support group, a support team leaning on one another for strength, inspiration, emotional support, and coping strategies. It's a very fun event, a rewarding day for everyone. They look forward to the walk because it's their walk too. Families, friends, loved ones, and individuals who have the conditions proudly take the opportunity to participate in the walk for hydrocephalus and spina bifida. Troy's Trail 7th Annual Walk takes place Saturday, June 9th at Clerg Park by the Art Gallery of Algoma. Registrations will begin at 12:30, with the walk starting around 1. If the weather is unfavorable, we were lucky enough to get a room downstairs in the library. All of the funds raised during this walk go towards Hydrocephalus Canada. Community is the strength behind each and every one of Troy's Trail, no matter how large or small the event may be. It's the dedication and passion of people involved that makes each year a success. Troy's Trail is growing, and by working together, we are continuing to make a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Troy. I have a proclamation. Whereas hydrocephalus is an excessive accumulation of fluid in the brain, it may be present at birth or may develop at any later stage in life. Whereas spina bifida is a birth defect that develops within the first 4 weeks of pregnancy, resulting in varying degrees of permanent neurological damage. And whereas there is no cure for either of these conditions that result in varying degrees of disability. Whereas Hydrocephalus Canada serves people with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, their families, and the public. And whereas Health Canada has proclaimed June as Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Awareness Month, and whereas there are many people who are not aware of the association or that it offers support, information, and education programs and funds research to find ways to prevent and treat these conditions. And whereas Hydrocephalus Canada encourages all Ontarians to learn more about these conditions and to appreciate the challenges faced by individuals affected by them. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of June to be Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. And I urge citizens to give full consideration and attention to the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Association of Ontario for their work on behalf of those with spina bifida and hydrocephalus and their families. Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Under agenda item 5.4, Mr. Rosa isn't here yet, so we'll move to 5.5, Local Food Week, and Jessica Laidley, Food Resource Center Coordinator with the United Way, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak to Local Food Week and its launch for 2018 here in the Soo. The Local Food Act, established in 2013, is a centerpiece of the province's local food strategy. In November 2013, Ontario passed Bill 36, the Local Food Act, to help foster successful, resilient local food economies and systems in Ontario, help increase awareness of local food in Ontario, include the diversity of local food, and develop new markets for local food. Each year, as a result, Local Food Week occurs during the first week of June to celebrate the agri-food sector. This year, the United Way Sault Ste. Marie Algoma District Food Security Division has partnered with 6 local organizations to establish a display in the Station Mall, establishing and celebrating Local Food Week from June 4th to the 10th. The Rural Agri-Innovation Network, Ermitinger-Clerg National Historical Site, Sault Ste. Marie Public Library, Sault Ste. Marie Museum, the Food Bank Farm, Soup Kitchen Sault Ste. Marie, and the United Way, of course, will have a display celebrating both historical and current agri-food and food security initiatives. We encourage the community to attend the final 2 days where members of these organizations will be on site to offer additional information and activities and to answer any questions about Local Food Week and the agricultural sector. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for just a few moments to inform you about our event, and we'll be there on June 8th and 9th. We hope to see you there.
Okay, so your event's June 8th and 9th.
Yes, so we'll be in attendance. The display is up for the entire week, and we encourage you to go have a look, but we'll be present the 8th and 9th in the Station Mall.
Great. Well, Jessica, this will mark the first time I've read a proclamation off of a computer. But
Excellent.
I have your proclamation here in digital form. Local food in Ontario is made possible by productive agricultural land and a favorable climate and water supply, an efficient transportation and distribution system, and knowledgeable, innovative farmers, food processors, distributors, retailers, and restaurateurs. And local food that is produced, the connection has been lost, Mr. Clerk. It's back. Local food that is produced, harvested, and created reflects the diversity of its people and delivers economic benefits and builds a stronger community. And local food such as vegetables, herbs, meats, and milk are available at farmers markets, retailers, restaurants, gardens, and farm gates throughout Sault Ste. Marie. Whereas local food aspires the people of Sault Ste. Marie to work with farmers, the public sector, and partners to promote local food and develop a shared understanding of what needs to be done to support local food in Ontario. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim and pronounce the 4th day of June to the 10th day of June 2018 as Local Food Week, and call upon all residents to celebrate the benefits of locally produced food to kick off the growing season. The opening of local farmers markets, Mill Market, and Agoma Farmers Market will take place on June 2nd, 2018, followed by the local agriculture display at Station Mall from June 2nd to June 10th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council.
Okay, so Mr. Rosa is not with us yet, so we'll move on to 5.6, Transit Route Optimization Study. Mr. Perano, you're here to do a presentation?
Okay. Good morning, or good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and the members of council. I'm here because I just wanted to give council and the members of the public an update on the transit route optimization plan. So we'll start at the beginning. Our community engagement. We started off with a consultant and we had 8 transit focus groups to launch the study, 4 public information centers, online surveys, 2 online surveys, 1 for the general public and 1 for employers, and they all provided input. We had online public transit survey, 837 respondents, 2/3 transit customers and 1/3 non-transit customers. Employers survey, we had 58 businesses that responded. 331 residents provided 1 or more comments. What the community wanted to see: longer service hours, more frequent service, lower bus fares, more direct service, service to more destinations, and better buses. So the consultant took all this information and he uses route design principles to create the routes we have today. So walking distances to bus stops, two-way service, safe travel speeds, ensure key priorities, such as maintain focus on downtown, reduce the need to transfer, bring back Sunday service, which was a big one that most people replied to on surveys. Serve residential areas that don't have service right now. So the recommendations: redesign of most routes, new bus transfer hub at or near Sioux College area, reinstatement of the Great Northern Route, new community bus route, reduce service 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. off-peak frequency during the summer months. So after we did all that, we wanted to go back to the public and find out whether or not they liked what they had seen after we completed it. So we went back and we did 3 more public open houses, 100% support in full with some minor changes. Online survey, 312 respondents, 361 comments, 78% supported the route changes. So, summary of the community engagement: 8 transit focus groups, 8 public open houses, 3 online surveys, 1,208 responses to the surveys, 900 plus comments. It was an unprecedented public input to the transit. At least that's what the consultant says. So, summary of improvements. We have a revised route network. We have east-west connectors. So now you'll be able to travel from the east end or the west end to the northern part of the city without having to come downtown. That was part of the route design. Return of the late evening Sunday service. Establish a central northern transit mobility hub, and we're working on that right now. We're talking to Sault College, and we've identified some areas there that we'd like to look at. Getting anywhere in the city within 60 minutes. Confirmation that the downtown transit terminal should be retained. Accelerated fleet renewal, which I'll have something on that a little bit later. Embracing technology to improve fare collection, provide real-time scheduling, so people get real-time information. So, implementing the changes, the timeline. First step, creating the service hours following the consultant's recommendations. So that was presented to council on April 9th. So from April 9th till now, we've been working on preparing this. So effective June 3rd, that's when we plan to start this. Summer service hours, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. We'll still have 30-minute service. So it's mainly getting people to work. Then from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 60-minute service. Then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., back to 30-minute service, getting people home from work. And then 6 p.m. to midnight, 60-minute service. All weekend service will be 60 minutes. School year hours, September through May, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. will be 30-minute service, Monday to Friday. 7 p.m. to midnight, 60-minute service. All weekend service at 60 minutes. Okay, so we had to put all this together. So it was important for us to prepare all this, and blocking and rostering of the work assignments for the operators, following the current parameters of the Collective Agreement and Employment Standards Act to create the operator work assignments. We couldn't do this without following our collective agreements and our Employment Standards Act, just to make sure lunches fall into the right place. So all that was created. Operator packages and indicating turn-by-turn routing and timing. They all have route maps. They all know where the bus is supposed to be. And that's all been completed. That's all been given to the operators. And we've also done some training sessions with them. So we've left it open for them to come and see our training officer. They can visit him anytime they want and get more detail if they need more detail. Customer information. Creating route maps and schedules, including community bus schedules, web page, paper copies, and social media. So we're already up on the web page. Social media, we're already developed that, and we're working on that. We're going to have banners starting on June 1st on some of the main sites in the city. The paper copies are a little bit slower. We're working on that. We're working hard on it. Hopefully we'll have them within the next few days so we can hand them out to the public. Posting bus stop information, including information on stop closures. So what we've done is we've gone to any bus stop that we're closing, and we place signs on them and let them know that the stop is closing as of June 3rd and where they can go to catch a bus. So we wanted the public to have that information so it's not a big surprise on June 3rd. So we're using advertising, informing the public route changes and where they can get the information. So we're using our radio advertising. And we're directing the public to our city webpage where they get all the information. And we've been working with corporate services on that. They've been really helpful. Creating banners on local media. Travel training. This is where our training officer will go to seniors' buildings. And he'll work with seniors on community bus schedules, on the new schedules, and how they can catch buses. He's already scheduled some meetings with the drop-in center, the West End Community Center. He's scheduled one with Finish Rest Home. So we're going to be, continuing to move with that. And anybody who needs a meeting and wants to talk to us, no problem, just give us a call and we'll set something up. So on kickoff day, June 3rd, 2018, we're going to have extra staff at that morning, and we're going to help the public, direct them as much as possible. And hopefully for the next couple of days after that, we'll continue to do that. It's about information and getting the information to them. What's next? Summer schedules are complete, and we'll prepare for the school year schedules. Review of the summer schedule using information surveys. So what we want to do is create a public survey again, post it using a Survey Monkey, and get more input on what changes we need to make, where we can improve, and items like that. The city will issue an RFP on smart card fare collection and mobility options. We're already prepared for next year's budget, AVL and Next Stop, so you can go on your smartphone app and see where the bus actually is and what time it will arrive at the stop. So that'll come next year. Future investment. Council directed staff on April 9th, 2018 to develop a plan to maximize the city's share of the public transit infrastructure funding over the next 10 years and make transit infrastructure a priority in order to leverage this funding opportunity. So what we're doing is over the next 10 years, we've got a plan for new buses and other technology developments, and all that's going to be presented to council during budget time to maximize all our funding that's available through transit infrastructure funding. So I'm here to answer any questions. I'm sure everybody's got questions from the public.
Okay, we're going to start with Councillor Shoemaker. I've got a list going here, councillors. I've seen your hands, so we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our Manager of Transit. If people have questions in the lead up to June 3rd or on June 3rd, who do we tell them to call, or what number do we give them?
Yeah, they can call our transit office.
Okay.
And we have a customer service representative there. We also have a summer student right now that will help us with information.
What's the number?
759-5438.
759-5438.
Okay, thank you. And then you had mentioned by next year you should have an app up and running that tells you where the bus is and when it's expected to be at the next stop. Did I hear that correctly?
That's our plan is to come to council in our budget to provide a plan for next stop. There's a few items that will be in that plan, but new buses are one of them, and the next stop, so somebody can go on their phone app and take a look and see where a bus actually is, and that helps in the wintertime when we have delays.
No, that's excellent. I think that's a great idea. I'm wondering if that would be integrated into a Sault Ste. Marie app that I think staff is looking into right now, or if it's its own separate app. Perhaps Mr. Bear would know, or I don't know if you'd know.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that would be our hope. It's specific technology that the transit department would be purchasing for the buses, but we're hoping the apps will be able to link together so people will have kind of one-stop shop to get the transit information.
Perfect, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sam, thank you very much. I'm very impressed with the public input that was provided. Impressive numbers. So, say for the east end to the west end, how far to the east do you go and how far to the west do you go?
Okay. To the west, we go out to Nixon Road.
Nixon?
East, it's all the way down to what we call Clements Crossing by the Rankin Reserve.
Okay.
Just past Fournier Road.
And what would the time period be? Say if I wanted to go from one extreme to the other extreme.
If you want to go from Fournier Road, the furthest end east, to the furthest end west, it'll be 60 minutes.
60 minutes max, eh? Good, thank you. Regarding your summer service hours, you have it from June to August?
That's right.
And then in September, you said because of the school year, school still continues in June. How's that going to work out for the 1 month period?
Through our ridership trends, ridership drops in June, mainly because most colleges and universities are already out of school by then. So there's a considerable drop in ridership.
Okay, so most of the ridership would be from the college and the university. And what about staffing? Increased staffing, or is this a decrease in staffing or status quo?
It's neutral.
It's neutral?
Yeah, all we've done is shift the hours around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You shifted the hours around based on a study of usage, correct?
Based on the consultant's report, yes.
So, Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Perino. On your third last slide, it's the heading is "What's Next?" The third bullet is "Make improvements, including route changes and schedule changes to the existing service." You talking about the existing service today as opposed to June 3rd, or going forward from June 3rd, you're still going to look at changes?
There's significant changes to our routing system. This is a major change to city transit routing system. The last major change that we had was 1993. So that's 25 years ago. If you think about the schools, the shopping centers, the industrial community that we had in 1993 to today, things have changed significantly. So there was a need to make that change.
Right, and I understand that. I understand the routes that have changed, but with that slide and that comment in there about what's next, are you referring to the changes that are coming out of the study that you're going to implement on June 3rd? Those are the make improvements, including route changes? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the changes, the majority of the changes will be June 3rd when it comes to routing.
Right.
Okay. The only other changes.
We have those routes, we see the changes.
That's right.
Are you saying in that slide that what's next is to look at it, implement it, and then make further changes if necessary?
We will.
Okay.
This is a work in progress.
Okay.
So what happens is when you start operating the system, you're going to find that we may need to make transfers in different locations, and we may need to make changes to the routes, and we're going to be open to that and continue to work with that.
Sure. And even the fact that I would agree that our, you had quite a few public input sessions as far as the whole changes went and the public input that was had. There are still going to be people that are not aware of the changes, especially changes from one street to another street.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, when that comes to light, how would we handle that? Is there still room in the system to look at it, that big of a change?
We can look at any change in the future. Just remember that when we put this together, there were some things that we identified, and some residents didn't have service. The walking distances were greater than the 450 meters,
Sure.
and we were trying to reduce that. So that's why we made changes to the routes. So if we have to revisit it again, no problem, we can do that. We're open to that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's a good point, Councilor Nero, because I think while there were some ways where the previous routes, as you said, they're 25 years old, and the city in 1993 isn't the same city as 2018, where there might have been some really inefficient routes, or maybe it took you a long time to get from a certain point to a certain point, there might have been some really efficient routes where some people were really used to getting on the bus here and getting off here, and that's going to change now for them, because the goal is to maximize the system as a whole and to make sure the greatest number of people are having the most convenient travel. So while some people's travel is going to become much more convenient, some people's travel is going to become a little less convenient, and I think we can expect to hear a lot over the next few weeks from people as this is implemented. And my understanding is that transit will be considering all these things and taking them into consideration, and will make the necessary adjustments or any reasonable adjustments or appropriate adjustments as we move forward that make sense. Yeah. There's going to be some growing pains. Like we have not changed our routing for 25 years, and we're now changing our routing.
And Mr. Mayor, that's what I wanted to confirm, is this set in stone, or are we talking about changes, as you're speaking of, that come out of the new routes?
Yeah. Mr. Perano, you can speak to that, I feel like. Everything I said was accurate?
Yep, exactly.
Councillor Butland?
Yeah. Tagging on to what Councillor Nero and you have said, Mr. Mayor, we think this report is great, particularly the Sunday service, but the proof will be in the pudding, to coin an old phrase. Can you come back in 3 months and say, yes, it's been a resounding success, somewhat success, more revenue, less revenue? Could you do that? And one other question. June the 3rd, you said you'll have extra staff out there trying to communicate changes to people. Sounds great. How are you proposing to do that? You'll send people across the city at different bus stops? And
No, where we're going to be is at the terminal. And so we're going to help direct staff at the bus stops themselves. We've already placed signs on stops that are closing, and so people are getting informed already. What we recommend is that people actually call us if they're not sure, or ask a transit operator if they're not sure.
how about a report back in a couple of months as to how it's doing?
We'll come back and we'll report back to you. And
Thank you. Thanks,
we'd like to
Mr.
do the public survey first.
Yep.
Before we do that.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I also want to say, once again, good report. I liked how you're just keep reinforcing the changes. You're using many different methods to communicate to our citizens, so well done. I just have 4 questions.
Okay.
Councillor Nero kind of touched on, so did the mayor, but special events and holidays. Do you have any thoughts around maybe any special events, like the lighting of the Christmas tree, so forth?
Yeah, we operate on quite a few holidays now, so I think there's only about 5 holidays that we don't actually operate on. So if we were to expand services, we'd have to come to council and ask for more funding for that, right? If we had and I just want to put this in perspective, if we had just not made the changes to the summer service and added the Great Northern route and brought back Sunday service, we would have had to come back and ask council for at least another $750,000 to put that service in. And it's difficult to do that when our ridership went down by 300,000 rides. Yeah. It would be really difficult for us to come to council and ask for more service when our ridership had decreased. So we're going to try to build the ridership back up with all the changes.
Okay, and it sounds like you're saying that as we're going through some of the understanding, the growing pains, and as special events happen, special holidays happen, they'll be revisited potentially.
Sure.
Possibly. But it also sounds like with this new change, these other areas might be already addressed.
We can visit anything. If council wants us to look at running on Christmas Day or something like that, we can visit that. And there is a cost to it.
Okay. I'm not asking too much of a micro question, but there's an international bus that goes across that takes students to Lake State and individuals coming back over to Canada, the international bus. And I believe the international bus stops at our transit. Mm-hmm. And so I'm under the impression that that's not going to be impacted, the schedule. It's going to link up with our public transit as well?
No, it shouldn't impact our public transit.
Okay, because I know, again, a lot of students depend on that bus linking up with the public service.
I don't think it will.
Okay.
Because the bridge bus is not run by us. It's a separate authority.
Right, even though it comes to our own base.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I just want to say well done on gathering so much feedback from the different surveys. Mm-hmm. What was your success of that? And why do you think you were so successful in the focus groups? And
I think there's a real interest in the city when it comes to transit. I'm sure everyone wants more service, mm-hmm. and they'd love to. Trust me, I'm a transit person. I've been doing this for 32 years. I'd love to add more service, but we have to do it within the means that we have.
Okay. I think also because you reached out to the public as well. There's so many areas within City Hall that opposite. So congratulations on reaching out to the public.
Thank you.
And the last piece, you talk about the new buses potentially. And I know this is kind of off topic, but the bike racks. Can people bring their bikes currently onto the buses?
Currently, you can bring a bike on a bus, as long as the bus is not overloaded and we don't have people standing, but you can bring your bike right now on a bus. So we will look at exterior bike racks and or interior bike racks.
Okay. And you're going to be hopefully within the next year looking at that, or?
I'm sorry?
Within the next year, will you be looking at that?
I didn't have it in the plans for next year, because if we do it, we have to do it for all the buses. You can't just have 1 or 2 bike racks out there. So we have to do it for all the bike, but it will be in the plan somewhere down the road.
Okay. But the positive is that you can bring your bikes onto the buses
You can do it right now.
Okay. And then my last question is safety at nighttime for women. Is it true that a woman could ask a bus driver to let her off closer to the top of her street, or does she have to stop at a bus stop?
I'm sorry, Sandra, I have a hard time hearing that
Yeah.
question.
Safety for women traveling at night.
Okay.
Is there a possibility that the bus can stop closer to a street that she may live?
We have preferred stops now in the evening. So usually when the lights go out or it gets dark out, you can ask the operator and he'll drop you off at the street.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Kropotich.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and thank you, Mr. Prano, for the report. I appreciate it. Just a question. So the Sault Ste. Marie airports had well over 200,000 passengers go through in the last 12 months. Have you ever looked at the feasibility of providing a service out to the airport to be able to bring the passengers to town?
We haven't looked at that at this time.
Could it maybe be something we could look to in the future?
We can look at it. We'd have to work out a cost. Providing a service out at the airport, it's a long distance.
Absolutely.
And limited ridership in that distance, so there would be a cost to doing that. And we don't want to interfere with the private companies that are actually doing that right now, too.
I understand there's a cost, but if there's a fair return on it as well, I think we should be looking into it.
We can look into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Grandinetti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Prano. You said on June 3rd that you're going to have someone working the phones to communicate with the public. Are you going to have someone communicating with the public through social media, Facebook, Twitter, if there's updates or the bus is delayed or something?
I'm not sure if the public is completely aware of everything that's going on. We've tried to inform people through public consultation. Some people turned out, but others haven't. So, we will make people aware as much as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fada.
Mayor, I understand that some drivers are laid off during the low points, the summer months. This has been the case in the past.
I'm sorry, Councillor Fada, I had a hard time hearing that question.
No, my question is, some drivers, I understand, are laid off during the slow period, during the summer months.
Again, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. My understanding is that some bus drivers are laid off during the summer.
No, there's no drivers being laid off.
There's no drivers that are laid off temporarily?
No, it's just what we're doing is there is a reduction in the work assignments in the summer, but we always have a problem in the summer months because we end up with overtime. So this will reduce our amount of overtime. We'll probably add an extra person on vacation because they're always requesting extra summer vacation. So we'll add people on vacation at that time also. So it's neutral. There's no effect on the operators. It's still 80,000 hours of service. It's just being distributed differently, that's all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, for my part, I just want to recognize the work that staff did on this. I think we can all see that there was quite a bit of consultation. I think it was really critical that we focused on and improved our transit system. I think this is a step one. There's more work to do, and there's going to be some growing pains with this, but transit's an important service, and I'm glad to see that we're doing what we can to improve it. So I just want to recognize that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I see Mr. Rosa here, so we can go back to that matter, Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 5.4, National Italian Heritage Month, and Orlando Rosa, President of the G. Marconi Men's Society, is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. Rosa.
I'm sorry?
I said welcome to council.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to members of council. I'm the president of the G. Marconi Society and have been asked to come here today to seek a proclamation by City Council. The federal government has declared June Italian Heritage Month. This is in recognition of the important contributions that Italian Canadians have made to Canada. Italian Heritage Month is a time to remember the sacrifices of our ancestors and to honor our fellow Italians who have immigrated to this great country. At the same time, Italian Heritage Month provides us an opportunity to celebrate the richness of the Italian culture, and it gives us an opportunity to educate and reflect upon Italian Canadian accomplishments and heritage. It is a time to bond with each other in our community, with all Italians that make up all of the amazing people of Canada, all cultures. It is also a time to celebrate our accomplishments by showcasing our strengths and continued contributions to the success of Canada. In Sault Ste. Marie, we have seen the contribution of Italian Canadians dating back to the late 1800s. The contribution of our ancestors, parents, and grandparents in this city have left an indelible mark for which we should all be proud. So I'm here on behalf of the G. Marconi Society and the Electric Marconi Society, and we welcome everyone in this city to help us celebrate Italian Heritage Month at the various events that have been arranged at the Marconi Cultural Event Center. And just to give you a smattering of the various things that will be going on this month, going on the month of June, we're going to kick off on Sunday, June 3rd, the tribute to all immigrants to Canada, and especially those recent immigrants that have come to Sault Ste. Marie at a come and go that's going to take place between 2 and 4 p.m. that afternoon. We'll be serving coffee, tea, pastry, Italian pastry, and we're there to enjoy each other's company. So we welcome everyone, including members of council and you, Mr. Mayor, to attend. There's no entry fee, there'll be cash bar. Later on Wednesday, June the 6th, we're going to have a pasta and parole event, and that's we're going to have various authors of Italian descent, the Honorable Ray Stortini, Rico Palarchio, Dr. Frank Sarlo, and we're going to have an opportunity to meet the authors, have a book signing, and have a dinner. On the 22nd of June, we're going to have a tour of Italy, a dinner. There's going to be dinners from 6 different regions of Italy. Then on the 24th of June, I'm hosting a pizza challenge at the Monos Cucina for all those who wish to compete, see that whether or not their pizza is better than my pizza. And lastly, on the 28th of June, we're going to have a special tribute to Yini Briac and Lou Nanny, former NHL players and former residents of the west end of the city. They're going to be presented with the prestigious Justice I.A. Vanini Award and recognized as individuals who have achieved distinction in our community. So, and lastly, on the 30th of June, we have the Director's Night, and we're going to have a director, Vanna Boli, who I understand was the director of the Oscar-winning movies Cinema Paradiso. She co-wrote it, so I think she's coming here from Chicago. There's a slight fee for that. All of this is on the Marconi Culture Event website, and certainly if anyone in the community would like to attend, we certainly welcome them, and we certainly welcome you, Mr. Mayor, and this. So I understand there's a proclamation that we've asked City Council to provide, and I have it here. I'm sure if you want to read it out or something that
I have it right here too, sir.
Okay.
So whereas the Canadian government has officially declared June 2018 as National Italian Heritage Month, recognizing the impact and importance of the contributions of Italian Canadians economically, politically, socially, and culturally, and whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie is home to 30% of Italian Canadians, the Marconi Cultural Center is pleased to showcase our heritage and culture with celebrations, festivals, exhibits, and our Italian food. And whereas the incredible success of the Italian Canadians in Sault Ste. Marie who contributed to the overall growth of the city and who are proud to call Sault Ste. Marie their home. Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim June 2018 as Italian Heritage Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and encourage everyone to enjoy the festivities offered throughout the month, celebrating the Italian heritage that our city enjoys. Thank you, Mr. Rose, and thank you for your work at the Marconi Club.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of council.
So council, we have 5 minutes before planning formally begins, so I guess we can get to the consent agenda and see where we can get to. So we'll go to consent for the 5 minutes that we have. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies. I don't know what number it is. It's the SR Center?
6.2.
6.2. To Mr. Ver, I guess, right?
That would be correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the third, Mr. Ver, third name we've had since the SR former Steelback. And how long is the contract? Can you differentiate for me the difference between the RFP and tender about the name change?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, the request for proposals went out, and the term will be 10 years for the new naming rights for the event center.
I don't know whether, Mr. Mayor, if I got the answer. Is there a difference between RFP as opposed to a tender? We get lots of tenders here on a regular basis, Mr. Mayor.
CEO.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco. Yes, there is a difference between an RFP and an RFT. An RFT is a request for tender that is for the lowest price, is what's taken as per the purchasing bylaw that currently exists within the corporation. An RFP is a request for proposal that says that there's an evaluation process that's undertaken that takes into consideration not just price but other elements.
So through you, so this is not the lowest offer, is it, Mr. Ver?
Well, in this case, you wouldn't go with the lowest offer, but I think they can, you're able to answer the question, General. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, we scored a number of criteria in selecting the candidate. In this case, this was the proponent that had the highest offer for the City of Sault Ste. Marie for the naming rights.
And as you said in your analysis, the city received expressions of interest from various organizations. At the closing date, 3 proposals. All proposals were worthy and met the criteria. Do we add the other 2 names, Mr. Ver?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, through the RFP process, obviously we have the names. We weren't going to announce those names as part of the report to council and make those other names public.
So that'll come later?
So no, we were not going to.
Oh, you're not going to?
Right.
Okay. So how long is the, Mr. Mayor, to you, how long is the agreement with the SR Center now? What year are we into?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, the agreement with SR ended in July
So that's
this
done.
year. That's right. So it is finished, and that was the end of their term. And so this is a new 10-year term with a new proponent.
And one final question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
This GFL, they do our, they're contracted by the city.
They do recycling. They do the city's recycling.
Thank you. And how long is their contract for the city at the moment, the recycling contract?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, I would have to defer that to Deputy CEO Girardi.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco, it was also a 10-year contract.
Is that up, Mr. Girardi?
No, it is not up.
How long is that?
That contract, I believe, and will mark my, I can't be exactly sure because I don't have the contracts in front of me, but I think it's 2022.
So the contract is not yet up, Councillor Turco.
Okay. My concern, Mr. Mayor, is if the contract is not renewed at GFL, this name would continue, right?
This is a separate contract.
So, but the answer would be yes? What you say?
Yeah, I think, I don't
get
think.
a lot of answers from a lot of people.
I think staff, upon our approval, staff is going to have to negotiate a contract with GFL, but staff wouldn't be in a position to negotiate any clause into that contract where that contract would be condition precedent on GFL getting another contract. So the contract that we enter into here will be independent of GFL's contract with recycling or any other contract with the city.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the idea of the memorial gardens. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker, then Councillor Hupinen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually just going to say that it's great to see GFL's name on the building. I think it fits with the alternative energy capital of North America. We're trying to be an environmentally friendly city. Green for Life is a company that is in waste management, obviously, but has a brand that is to help provide a more sustainable and healthy environment. So I think that the name fits. I'm glad that the name Memorial Gardens is in there, and just want to give kudos to a great community partner, GFL, in stepping up to the plate for the event center, the GFL Memorial Gardens here.
Councillor Hupinen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Shoemaker. Everything he said is I'm on the same thought. And thank you, Mr. Ver, for the report. I just have a question about the different pictures for the different layout, how it will be on the building. It's showing different examples. Is there one that's been recommended to us, or are we going to be able to choose?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hupinen, the images that were provided as conceptual drawings by the sign company working with GFL. Staff will work with GFL and the proponent to finalize that design and proceed with a sign. So we weren't planning on coming back to council at the design, but these were provided to give you an idea of what the sign may look like.
Okay, that sounds good. I think it's an excellent idea. I'm glad you chose that, or they were the one that won the award. Anything that we can do to help reduce our carbon footprint is a plus, and I can't wait to see the Green for Life logo up at the SR Center. Thank you.
Anybody else on this matter? So we can stop calling it the SR Center. We can again call it the Memorial Gardens, and when the contract is signed, we can call it the GFL Memorial Gardens. But I was glad to see council agreed that we should put the Memorial Gardens back on the building. I think that's important. It's nice that we did that, and I know it means a lot to the folks that participate both in the 49th and at our local Legion, and they've expressed a lot of appreciation for that, so I'm glad that we made that decision. All in favor? Well, actually, sorry, it's on the consent agenda, so we're not blowing it off. But we can leave consent now. We're going to leave consent, so this matter's been dealt with, and we're going to go back to the planning agenda. So, Madam Clerk, if we can go to the planning agenda, please.
Under agenda item 7.7.1, A1118Z, 8795 and 107 Huron Street, 1188004 Ontario Incorporated. A motion by Councillors Burney and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of the Director of Planning, Community Development and Enterprise Services dated May 28, 2018 concerning rezoning application A1118Z be received, and that Council approve the request for removal of the holding provision bylaw on the subject property. Further, that the Legal Department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Mr. McConnell, I'm going to ask you just to give a summary of this application for all the folks watching us at home, and then we'll go to the proponent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject property is a portion of the former St. Mary's paper property. Back in 2011, City Council rezoned this property to permit a wide variety of uses. However, at that time, there weren't any clear plans for the development of the property, and there were a number of technical concerns on the property relating to traffic and servicing mostly. Council decided to rezone it subject to a holding provision. The current applicant has resolved or is in the process of resolving all of the technical considerations, and staff is recommending that the holding provision be removed on that portion of the property which is currently owned by the applicant at this time. And Mr. Rosa is here on behalf of the applicant should council have any questions.
Okay, Mr. Rosa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. So you're here on behalf of 1188004 Ontario Inc.?
Yes.
Would you like?
We made application remove the holding provision on that particular piece of property, and we certainly concur with planning recommendation that be recommended and approved.
Okay.
I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, so Mr. Rose is here on behalf of the applicant to answer any questions that are relevant to the application. Council, do we have any questions? Councillor Fata? Can you hear me, Mr. Rosa?
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, just for anyone that's listening, just to give us an idea, the property is currently privately owned.
Correct.
And will remain privately owned.
Correct.
Okay, and it will be moving ahead. The intent is to move ahead with these plans for a train station and basically what we have right now at the Station Mall property. The idea is to relocate the station to that location.
I can only tell you that there are confidential negotiations that are ongoing between the owner of the property and the railway in regards to relocation, but I can't at this time indicate whether or not that's come to fruition.
I'm just trying to understand the involvement of the city in this whole exercise and where the city plays a role in this.
Mr. Rosa, maybe I can, we're responsible for zoning, right? So this is an application that relates to the use of the property. Municipally, we control the use of properties in the community, and we determine where uses can occur. So that's our role. Our role has nothing to do with what, like, the discussions that Mr. Rose is referring to. So I think you would understand that that's our role, Councillor Fata.
No, I understand. I'm just kind of maybe looking further ahead, and I'm just concerned about the involvement of the city in terms of.
Let's not look past this application. This is an application that's before us. There's no reason to look ahead. Look at the application, and make your decision based on the application that's before you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's good enough.
Any other questions for Mr. Rosa? Is there anybody here that's here to speak in opposition to the application? Anybody in opposition? Seeing none, all in favor of the application? The application's carried, Mr. Rosa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the council.
Under agenda item 7.7.2, A1218Z, 100 Estelle Street, 1972659 Ontario Limited. We have an amended motion by Councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth, resolved that the report of the senior planner dated May 28, 2018 concerning rezoning application A1218Z be received, and that the application be postponed to allow for new notice. And I think Mr. McConnell can speak to that.
Mr. McConnell, if you can please speak to this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Late this afternoon, staff discovered that the original notice that was sent to the neighbors contained an error. The error had nothing to do with Mr. Gervaisi's application. It had to do with the existing zoning on the property. In consultation with our legal department, we agree that council should defer this, postpone this to give us sufficient time to give new notice. I spoke to Mr. Gervaisi about this afternoon, and we agreed on the June 25th date to bring this back to council. And in the interim, staff will give new notice.
Okay. So, council, the decision before us tonight isn't to approve or not the application. The decision before us is whether or not we will approve the postponement of the application to June 25th. Is anybody here from the applicant to speak to the application?
No.
No. So the applicant isn't here to speak to it. Is there anybody here that wants to speak to the application? Or Mr. Deco, are you here to speak to the application?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff. If it's going to be deferred until the 25th,
You'll speak then.
Hold off. Thank you.
Okay. So, council, do you have any questions of staff on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. So the matter will be postponed to the 25th. Mr. Deco, you can return at that time to speak to it.
Under agenda item 7.7.3, A818Z, 188 Kohler Street, 1890685 Ontario Incorporated. A motion by Councillors Fata and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of the senior planner dated May 28, 2018 concerning rezoning application A818Z be received, and that council postponed this application to the June 25, 2018 council meeting.
Okay. Mr. McConnell, if I can have you please give a summary of this application.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is the former Alec Muir School on Kohler Street. The applicant has requested a deferral. He has spoken to several of the neighbors and would like to use the additional time to finalize his plans or to refine his plans as well as speak to the neighbors again. So at his request, staff is recommending that this matter also be postponed to the June 25th meeting.
Okay. So is the applicant present to speak to it?
No, he's not in attendance this evening.
Is there anybody here that's intending on speaking against the application? Seeing none, council, do you have any questions? All in favor? Carried. So that matter's also been postponed. Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we should, before we get back in the consent agenda, we should probably deal with the PUC matter, Madam Clerk. We have the PUC here, and we don't need to have the chair and the CEO sit through our consent agenda if it is not necessary, so we can please move to that matter.
So under agenda item 7.8.2, PUC Incorporated and PUC Services Incorporated shareholders meeting, I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth resolved that City Council is now authorized to meet in open session as the sole shareholder of PUC Incorporated and PUC Services Inc. And further be it resolved that City Council appoints Mayor Christian Provenzano as Council's proxy to vote on the resolutions of the shareholder of PUC Inc. and PUC Services Inc.
All in favor? Carried. Welcome to Council. Mr. Bonifero, Mr. Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council. It wasn't our intention to have a presentation tonight as part of the AGM, but I just bring you up to date on some of the activities. First of all, to the councillors that won't be carrying on, this is your last AGM, Councillor Butlin and Councillor Meyer especially, who will be moving on. Certainly we've appreciated the support over the years, and Councillor Butlin, I can assure you that there's lots of activity and irons in the fire that you'll be pleased to see. So we're very pleased as a board and I'd like to extend my thank you to the board, that we're a 9-member board. Councillor Christian, who also is not here, and the mayor sits on that board, and we're very active, and the board has been very progressive, and we've had quite a bit of change in the organization, as you're aware, in the last 3 years. Most significantly, Mr. Brewer started as our CEO in January, so he's entering day 150, I think, in his tenure. We also recently have had a new CFO, so the management team of 4 or 5, we've had a significant turnover. We just recently came out of celebrating our 100th year. And as a utility, we're very proud to be part of this community and that you own your utility. I think that's an important asset that you have. We take a great responsibility in understanding your requirements of us. So we have lots of initiatives that I think will marry along with your green energy and your alternative energy capital of Ontario. We've partnered with the EDC and to work with the city to bring partnerships to the community. I think there's a couple of exciting ones that we hope to see come to fruition in the next very short little while. So having said that, there's some formalities to go through. There's no new appointments of directors. Our directors will be there's 4 of us to be reappointed for terms. Terms are a new cycle. As you'll recall, last year when I was here, we staggered appointments of the members so that we would have the board not have an anniversary date of all at the same time. So there's a couple of renewals. The mayor and Councillor Christian are 2 of those up for reappointment, as well as myself and Cecilia Bruno. And then you just have your formalities of the financial statements, which you have in your package, and the appointment of the auditor. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we're here. CEO Burr is with me to answer questions. As I say, we'll be back in front of you in, I think, 2 weeks at your next meeting to present a more formal presentation on the activities of the organization and some of the future plans and where we see ourselves going and how we see ourselves implementing an exciting strategic plan. But we're certainly here to answer any questions should you have some at this time.
So the material before your council relates to the appointments and to the financial statements of the organization. So if we have any questions for either Mr. Bonifero or Mr. Brewer, I welcome you to ask them those questions. Seeing no questions, Madam Clerk, if you can please read the shareholder resolutions.
The first one is a resolution of the shareholder of PUC Inc. Be it resolved that the financial statements of PUC Inc., the corporation, for the fiscal year ended on December 31, 2017, together with the report of the auditors thereon as placed before the undersigned, are hereby approved. And the appointment of auditors, be it resolved that the firm KPMG LLP Chartered Accountants is hereby appointed auditor of the corporation until the close of the next annual meeting of the shareholder or until their successors are duly appointed at a remuneration to be fixed by the directors being hereby authorized to fix such remuneration. And be it resolved that the following persons, each resident Canadians, are hereby elected directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the 3rd annual meeting of the shareholder following their election or until their successors have been duly elected or appointed, subject to the provisions of the corporation's bylaws and the Ontario Business Corporations Act. Cecilia Bruno, Jim Bonifero, Christian Provenzano, and Paul Christian.
So council, before I vote on that, do any of you have any questions or concerns? Seeing none, I vote in favor.
And a resolution of the shareholder of PUC Services, Inc., be it resolved that the financial statements of PUC Services, Inc., the corporation, for the fiscal year ended on December 31, 2017, together with the report of the auditors thereon as placed before the undersigned are hereby approved. And be it resolved that the firm of KPMG LLP Chartered Accountants is hereby appointed auditor of the corporation until the close of the next annual meeting of the shareholder or until their successors are duly appointed at a remuneration to be fixed by the directors being hereby authorized to fix such remuneration. And be it resolved that the following persons, each resident Canadians, are hereby elected directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the third annual meeting of the shareholder following their election or until their successors have been duly elected or appointed, subject to the provisions of the corporation's bylaws and the Ontario Business Corporations Act. Cecilia Bruno, Jim Bonifero, Christian Provenzano, and Paul Christian.
Any comments or concerns, council? Seeing none, I vote in favor. Is that it? So we have to move to come out of this meeting of the shareholder?
We don't generally.
Oh, no. Gentlemen, thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
Mr. Mayor. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we will see you in 2 weeks. So we can move back to the consent agenda, Madam Clerk. So we're back on consent. And we
Yeah.
dealt with 6.2.
And I was going to save and accept agenda item 6.3 from consent because there is a supplementary motion that Councillor Shoemaker had
So
brought
we're
forward
moving 6.3 from consent.
to regular.
So does anybody else have any matters in the consent agenda they'd like to speak to? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you please read the motion on the consent agenda?
Motion by Councillors Spada and Hollingsworth, resolved that all items listed under date May 28, 2018, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 6.3, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. So we will move to 6.3. Madam Clerk, if you can read the motion on 6.3.
Okay, the first motion is by Councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated May 28, 2018 be received as information.
Okay, so that's the motion we're on. So we'll allow council the opportunity to ask questions on that motion. We'll vote on that motion, and once that motion's dealt with, we'll move to Councillor Shoemaker's motion. So Councillor Shoemaker, you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I believe it's Mr. Ver. Yes. You've got a number of public and private sector entities listed and what they charge or if they charge for parking on page 3 of your report, I think it is. You've got OLG listed there. There are other tenants in the Bondar building. I think M&R is a big one, and I think there's some smaller ones, Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities. Do you know if they also pay for parking, or did you make that type of inquiry?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, excuse me, I believe we just checked with the OLG and looked at their rates, and I don't have the rates for any other tenants in that building.
Okay. And then did you find any, I guess, public sector, quasi-public sector entities that didn't charge for parking in your search?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, the list we provided is to the large extent the organizations that we contacted for parking to give us a sample of what was done in the community and based on the original council resolution to provide those numbers for the organizations mentioned.
Okay. Is it fair to say, or perhaps not, correct me if I'm wrong, but the other municipalities you canvassed, Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Timmins, they charge for parking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, the city of North Bay was the one city that did not charge for parking. The other northern communities did charge for parking. We did make a note in the report of the location and the existence of parking at those facilities as one factor which may have led into the charge for parking, given that they're located in downtown locations. There's no parking surrounding them, and they refer staff to other lots, basically.
And in the North Bay example, it says in the resolution that it's paid for within the annual city budget, and there's no charge for the employee themselves. Is that how our parking works, or is ours just not charged and sort of not paid for or not accounted for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, currently it's the fees for maintaining the parking lots are just captured within the city's budget, so there's no particular parking charge or fee that's calculated.
So perhaps, I don't want to phrase it too sort of liberally, but North Bay accounts for their parking cost, and Sault Ste. Marie just sort of, whatever the parking cost is, gets absorbed in our general budget.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, correct. The fees for maintaining the lots would fall into our budgets for the facilities maintenance for those locations.
Okay.
Do you want to speak to that? CEO wants to add.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, or actually I'll maybe ask for confirmation from the Deputy CAO. The parking that we're referring to, for example, at the Civic Center, there is for obviously for staff members, but it's also for visitors as well. So those charges that are being referred to in terms of the expenses within our budget are to maintain those parking lots, which include parking by employees, but also by other visitors to the facilities.
Right. Okay. And is that it? Do you know, is that any different at any other parking lot at other city halls across the north?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker again, or to the Deputy CA to confirm in terms of the canvas that we did, but as it was seen in the report, it's not that different. The visitors, in the cases where there is a parking fee that is applied to employees, it's also applied to visitors to those lots.
Right. Okay. And I would never suggest that. But I am, there's a motion on there that I am suggesting something else, so we'll get to that in a minute. How do we monitor? I know that, or I think perhaps, and I could be wrong, there's some staff who have a pass to park in the north lot and the rest of the staff park in the south lot here at City Hall. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. There are passes for the two lots.
So how do we monitor and enforce that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I'll defer that question to Director Brent Lamming, who is in conversations with them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, right now we have our special constables that monitor the lots and especially focus on our accessibility parking, and if there's any violations there, we act accordingly and proceed with tickets in those locations.
So is this the commissioners who monitor the other municipal lots as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Shoemaker, that is correct.
Okay. So if we were to bring in a paid parking system in City Hall or elsewhere, at least at City Hall, I guess, we've already got a monitoring capacity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Councillor Shoemaker, we could use the special constables. We could also look at contracting out the service to a third party. There's a number of ways there, and whatever option you choose, there's different costs related to each of those options.
Right. Okay. I think that was all my questions on the report. I do have a number of comments and obviously an amending motion.
Yeah, so we'll go through the questions, and when we're done all the questions, we'll vote on the information motion, and then we'll move to your motion. Councillor Hupinen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Nero, if he is available. My question concerns, at the city, we presently have union and non-union staff. Would charging the union folks have any ramification to this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hupinen. Certainly, the bargaining units represent negotiating for employment terms and conditions. If something like this were to be considered, I would expect that we would have to follow proper procedure in how we would delineate and negotiate this type of arrangement with the unions. Certainly, it would be difficult, and I would expect certain challenges if we did this before the respective open periods of our collective bargaining agreements.
That wasn't entirely clear to me, Mr. Nero. I mean, Councillor Hupinen, do you understand what was referred to?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
That's good, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Hupinen?
No, that answers my question, thank you.
Any other questions on the parking? Board Councillor Kropotich?
Just one question to Mr. Nero. In recent collective agreements with the municipality, has it ever been stated to any of the the union regarding the possibility of having paid parking for municipal employees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, no, in the involvement that I personally can attest to, it has not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to pick up on the same questions here to Mr. Nero. For clarification, Mr. Nero, are you saying, or did you say, that if council were to implement parking fees to our unionized employees, that any fees would have to wait till the next collective agreement came due?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, now I understand where the mayor was going earlier.
Yeah.
To do this properly without fear of challenges, that would be my recommendation to council, is to wait until the opening period of bargaining. Certainly you can implement a policy as you're considering now. However, given my experience and research into the jurisprudential landscape of this issue, I would expect some challenge.
So in your view, the challenges would be otherwise named as grievances?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, yes.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm just going to follow up on this so I understand myself. So what you're saying, Mr. Nero, is that we wouldn't, the city, if the city chose to implement a fee for parking, that we were going to require our staff to pay union and non-union, that we would need the union's permission to do that? Like, wouldn't the collective agreements would prohibit us from doing that?
To you, Mr. Mayor.
Past practice argument? Is that what you're
There would be an estoppel argument, I'm certain, given the privilege that goes back many years of not paying. And again, I'm not saying we wouldn't be successful. I'm just stating I would expect some challenges. I'm not saying we wouldn't be successful in defending those. I'm just stating that it would be a cleaner process if we can do it at the appropriate time.
Well, you would potentially minimize the challenge to it, but if it wasn't, it would then become a bargaining issue. So you'd have to be conscientious about doing it at that time, because then you're inserting another dynamic in the bargain.
Correct.
Any other questions on the report? Seeing none on the report, we'll vote on the report. It's just receiving it for information. All in favor? It's carried. Councillor Shoemaker has a motion to give the clerk. I'll have the clerk read that motion.
I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Grandinetti. Whereas a May 28, 2018 report titled Review of Municipal Staff Parking Fees sought further direction from Council on proceeding into a detailed analysis of implementing staff parking fees. And whereas staff set out the paid parking practices of other Northern Ontario cities, including Thunder Bay, Sudbury, and Timmins, and whereas many public sector and greater public sector agencies in Sault Ste. Marie charge their employees for parking. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to bring forward an implementation plan for paid employee parking at the Civic Centre North and South lots, the SR Centre, the Ermitinger-Clergue National Historic Site, the Transit Terminal, and the Transit Centre. Further be it resolved that staff use comparators from other organizations in Sault Ste. Marie to determine the rate at which employee parking will be charged. Further be it resolved that staff be requested to include full-time employees and city councillors in implementation of the paid parking implementation plan, but not to include part-time employees or summer students. Further be it resolved that staff be requested to report back on the recommended method of enforcement to minimize enforcement costs to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, so Councillor Bruni.
Rachel, be able to read again the locations?
Clause.
The locations?
The locations, okay.
Please?
Can you please read the locations?
The Civic Centre North and South lots, the SR Centre, the Ermitinger-Clergue National Historic Site, the Transit Terminal, and the Transit Centre.
So I think what Councillor Shoemaker's done is he's circled downtown. So if you work downtown and you work downtown for the city and you're a full-time employee, you're paying. If you're a student, you're not paying. If you're a part-time employee, you're not paying. And if you're a full-time employee that works for the city elsewhere in the city, the John Roads, Public Works, the West End Community Center, you're not paying. So if you're a full-time employee living downtown, you're paying. I had the benefit of spending more time with the resolution, I think, than the rest of you, but that's the way I read it. Is that correct, Councillor Shoemaker? Yeah. Did you want to speak to your resolution? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you know, you had the resolution on Thursday or Friday when I sent it in. It didn't come out on the addendum till today. So I hope everybody has had the chance to look at the amending staff motion that's on the addendum. The addendum was handed out, I believe, a short while ago. It asks that our full-time staff in the downtown area, from the Transit Building to the SR Center to the Old Stone House and City Hall, be required to pay for parking. I suspect that some will say this is a bad resolution because it treats our downtown staff different than our uptown staff. Further, I suspect that others will say it's a bad resolution because it treats our part-time staff different than our full-time staff. If those are the comments you hear tonight, know that those making those statements are letting a somewhat imperfect solution stand in the way of doing anything whatsoever. I agree it would be ideal if we could come up with one system and implement it across the city. But that's not the reality in the Soo, and that's not the reality anywhere else in Northern Ontario, as the report from staff details. What's truly unfair is that someone working as a receptionist 100 meters from here at the OLG is required to pay for parking, but someone working as a receptionist here at City Hall is not required to pay for parking. You will note in the report that not a single of the public sector entities that was listed in the report, from Algoma U to OLG to the hospital to the courthouse, lets their employees park for free, except the city. So staff has noted in their report a number of areas where a decision is required. And while this resolution may seem like it overly micromanages the situation, in reality, it only goes through the various areas that staff sought direction and provides that direction. I'm not saying it's the only thing we can consider. I'm saying this is what I have come up with as I have read through the report and noted where staff wanted further direction and what I think is in the best interests of the community to ensure fairness across the board. For example, staff note they have difficulty in enforcing paid parking regime in the more remote locations of the city, like public works and the cemetery. So this resolution directs staff only to implement paid parking at our downtown buildings. Further, staff note it would be both unfair and uncommon for part-time employees to be charged for parking. So this resolution directs staff only to implement paid parking for our full-time employees. Finally, staff note that there are 3 ways parking fees can be determined: on an annual cost recovery basis, on a lifetime cost recovery basis of the asset, or at a market rate. So this resolution asks staff to implement a market rate approach to determining the parking fee. It's a system that I think will need further tweaking and adjustments if implemented, but I don't think that should be the reason to treat city staff differently than city staff in other cities or than other public sector staff within our own city and within our downtown core. Because right now, the general taxpayer is picking up the cost to paint the lines, to tar the parking lots, to repair the asphalt, to repair the guardrails. And that is uncommon across any other public sector entity in the Soo that was detailed in the report, and uncommon across our Northern Ontario comparators. So I would hope that this council will do the right thing for the general tax base, even though it's a difficult decision to make, given that we work with the city staff here every day, day in and day out. I still think it's the right decision, and not let a perhaps imperfect resolution stand in the way of doing anything whatsoever.
Okay, questions or comments on the resolution? Councillor Turco.
So, through you, Mr. Member, you can answer this. So, Councillor Shoemaker says why should the OLG pay, and why are we being selective then? Why certain city employees are being affected by this, but not others? Why aren't we all for one, what's that play, and one for all? Why don't we do it for everybody?
Well, I couldn't answer that. I think you're going to have Councillor Shoemaker speak.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier, Mr. Mayor. The downtown is where people are paying for parking in our city generally. So we charge an annual fee if someone, for example, I'll pick a business at random. If Solo, the restaurant, needs their employees to park and they're parking in the SR Center parking lot, they have to pay an annual fee for a permit to park in the SR Center parking lot, but our staff don't have to. That's a different situation than exists uptown, where it's not common to find paid parking, except, you know, I will acknowledge the hospitals up there, and they charge a fair bit for parking. So I would say because parking is already implemented on a paid basis in the downtown area. That's why I'm focusing on the downtown city buildings to implement paid parking for city staff.
Thank you. I don't know whether that makes sense or not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth, I apologize.
Thank you. Through your worship, to our human resource manager. Thank you. In your professional opinion, from my own research and reading, when it comes to more modern approaches to give incentives to employees, in your professional opinion, is the trend going towards giving parking to their employees as an incentive? So in other words, would this be a de-incentive? Would this be a motivator? How do you see this as a professional opinion from an HR perspective?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, certainly I think anytime you're looking at staff and wanting to decrease what they view as their remuneration or compensation, it's typically viewed as a de-incentive. I can't speak to the practice of eliminating paid parking as an incentive across the industry. I'd have to do more research to give you a better answer on that, but certainly from my perspective, and I think the CEO wants to weigh in on this.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. It's mostly anecdotal, but I can say from previous lives in organizations that I've been with, it has been an incentive to pay for the parking of the employees. Even in those cases where it used to be paid by the employees themselves, there was always programs that were being brought into place to actually pay for the parking and or find other means to be able to get people to work.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, I just have two comments. Should I make my comments now?
Let's go through the questions and then we'll have a round of comments.
Okay.
Councillor Shoemaker, you've made your comments on this, yeah. So I have Councillor Compadre, then Councillor Bruni, then Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano. I just want to verify, has the city management, they were involved in a wage freeze, and I just wanted to know if that wage freeze is currently still going on. I guess it would be to Mr. Nero.
It isn't. It isn't. The wage freeze was for a set period of time, and then we're beyond that now, Councillor Compadre.
And when was it over, do you know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Compadre, December 31st of 2017.
Okay, thank you. Just one question to Mr. Nero. When it comes to, in part of the resolution, it talks about a few people, part-time and students that would be exempt from paying the parking fees. Would that in fact create a two-tier system? And what would be the impact on a two-tier system? What would it create among the employees locally? Would it create some division and some morale problems?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Compadre, certainly when you treat a select group of employees differently, it tends to lead to some disagreements. That's traditionally the case. Part-time to full-time, depending on what the system that we're going to employ is desired to do, if it's just a straight deduction off pay or what the system looks like, that might be easier to control. The more concerning, or at least the more challenging part would be within your groups of full-time at particular locations. If they're bargaining unit employees, it would be very difficult to carve out a piece of one bargain unit and have them pay and have not another group pay that's at a different location. That would be challenging.
Absolutely. Just one more question, and I don't know who would be able to answer this, but the local small businesses in this area in the downtown, I don't have any idea how many actually charge their employees to pay for parking. And there's a number of them that we have here, local businesses. I'd be interested to know what that answer is.
Staff didn't canvass all the local businesses. I would think it's not many as a local business and local employer who employs 9 people. I guess I'm number 10. I pay for the parking, but I don't charge any of my staff back for that parking.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano.
So I have Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to Mr. Vera, Community Development and Enterprise Services. Mr. Vera, how many of your staff work outside of the downtown area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. I won't give you an exact number. I can say, though, in my area, we do have cemeteries that we have staff working remotely. We have staff that work at the Northern Community Center, the John Rhodes, and the SR Center, and some of those staff rotate between those different locations. And the senior centers as well. So there's a fair number of staff in our area that are located outside of the downtown zone that's been discussed in the resolution.
So then in your department, some will be charged parking and some will not be charged parking. It just, how fortunate you are to work in the downtown area, I guess. It's the luck of the draw. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Bruni?
That's it.
Councillor Butland.
Mr. Mayor, I'll have comments at the appropriate time.
So, Councillor Fada, you have questions or comments?
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we're still on questions.
I don't know whether I should be bringing this up in terms of, negotiations, but Mr. Nero, in terms of fairness, in terms of dealing with, like we're talking about downtown versus uptown, and it just crossed my mind, is there any way of, I mean, this is from your professional opinion, but in the process of the bargaining process, can this not be used as a bargaining chip by the city in terms of dealing with all employees the same way, whether they work at the cemetery or they work at City Hall, where you don't change the current situation, but you deal with it at the bargaining table, and it becomes a bargaining chip, knowing full well, and the staff members, whether they work at the cemetery or Sackville Road or City Hall, they know that they're not paying for parking. We know that. We made this very clear that the public knows that. So could this not become part of the bargaining process where we deal with every employee the same? So they know full well that they're not paying, and yet it becomes part of the agreement that in the end result, when we do come up with a final figure, could this not be part of the process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fada, I'm not sure how much detail we want to get into strategy when it comes to bargaining and open, but certainly any opportunity to leverage something in exchange for something the city is requiring is always a good opportunity to explore. It's difficult to try to exchange proposals when there's nothing concrete. It's difficult to leverage a promise to implement parking in exchange for X when it's not really happened. But certainly we look for any kind of leverage we can have to try to have something that perhaps the union wants that we can give up and vice versa. That's what we do in bargaining. We try to find common ground and solve each other's challenges, but certainly it's a consideration that we will have going forward for sure.
Any other questions? You have a question, Councillor Butland?
Just one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will the visitors pay to park at City Hall under this resolution?
No.
No? Thank you.
I have a couple questions myself. There's 6 lots. So when I look at these lots, I just want you to correct me, Mr. Ver, or anybody in the senior staff who can. Of the 6 lots, I think there's only 1 lot that the public doesn't use in parking. So I think 5 of the 6 are open to the public and the public parks in. Civic Center North, I think is just our staff. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's one section of parking spots in the north lot. Are there not? Excuse me. Maybe I'll defer to Brent Lamming, sorry, Director. He had some of those details.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to yourself. Yes, there's some spots set aside there under a previous arrangement through the HD Sports Grill. So many spots that are in the north lot and in the south lot. So there's 15 in the south lot and another 30, approximately 30 spots that are in the north lot that through a long-term lease arrangement.
So we have an obligation then to keep those lots maintained and clean?
That is correct.
So we have an obligation on all of these lots to maintain these lots independent of staff parking. Is that not correct?
Yes, we do.
Because all of the parking lots, all of these other lots are open to the public and the public parks in all of these lots. Councillor Shoemaker, you didn't include the fire hall downtown. Is there any specific reason for that?
That may have just been an oversight.
Because then you'd have city employees who work downtown who aren't paying.
Yes, no, that's probably just an oversight when I was going through the list. I'm hearing the discussion, and I'm prepared to amend that to include the fire hall.
I wouldn't support that in any event, because I don't support the motion. But like, I'm asking you why you didn't include the fire hall.
Yes, no, that was obviously just an oversight. But given the comment, I am hearing the discussion. It seems the biggest concern is with charging some employees and not all, more so than charging part-time versus full-time employees. So, I mean, we have to put something on the table, and I think this is sort of what was initially proposed, plus or minus the fire hall. I'm personally prepared to put forward all city employees who are full-time, but you know, it's. I think, as I sort of said, I want. This is a starting point, and I'm prepared to. I'm the only one that put forward a resolution to implement any of this. Otherwise, it'd just be received as information. It wouldn't go anywhere. So, I want to see something, whether it's this, whether it's an amendment from what the consensus is.
Councillor Shoemaker, sorry, Councillor Turco. What do you keep on saying something to me, and I
No,
don't
is this a new amendment process?
Well, he's just speaking to
Well,
it.
yeah, I mean...
Your motion's before us.
Yes.
Unless you have a specific way to amend it, like your motion's before us. So that's what we're considering and discussing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question would be, and this is to members who sit on this body, that sit on the DSAB. The DSAB is a body, a government body, government-funded body downtown. Do you know if any of your DSAB employees pay for parking? Is the answer no?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Councillor Fada, do you have a different answer?
On this, we're talking about what, about 180 Brock?
It's a question of whether the DSAB employees who work downtown pay for parking.
What I was going to say, if I may, our office worked out of 180 Brock 30 years ago, and we had paid parking at that location.
You didn't work for the DSAB, did you?
No, we worked as a public servant, but
is anybody aware of whether the school boards charge their employees for parking downtown? We have the Etchen Brûlé site. Does anybody have any knowledge of whether the employees at the Etchen Brûlé site pay for parking? Because, Mr. Nero?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can speak to the public board. They do not charge for parking at the public board.
Okay, so those are my questions. We'll take comments now. Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure where council is going with this because I'm not sure where I want to go with it yet, but I am sure that this report has a lot of moving parts in it, and I don't think that a decision should be made at one meeting. And I understand Councillor Shoemaker's intent of bringing a resolution just to bring the report to an end. But I would suggest that if we want to bring it to an end, that something this significant should really go to a committee. There's a lot of open questions in here that really need to be considered before we go one way or another. So I don't know how we get there to the committee stage, but I wouldn't want to throw that out there.
Okay, any other comments on the motion before us? We'll go with Councillor Butland.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Nero, that's a good point. And your idea of there's a lot of moving parts. When I read this report, I said, oh my goodness, talk about a complicated, convoluted process and how to really ingest it all and say, yeah, let's go forward. And when Councillor Shoemaker says, well, I want to see something, something started and let's go. Well, we have to be very more specific as to what specifically we want. And first it was the downtown. Well, yeah, what about the folks who work outside of the downtown area and yet they're city employees? The consistency needs to be there for sure. And in my arguments, I don't think are going to be all that popular. I think the general population will say, absolutely, charge the people who work at City Hall. Everybody else pays, and those city staff, believe me, I get this all the time. Well, they're underworked and overpaid, and they have security forever. So, yes, bring it to them. It's not everybody, but that's a common complaint. And sometimes when you work for the public, you're under the microscope all the time. And that's unfortunate, but that's a reality. Has anyone come forward and say, hey, by the way, I don't like the fact that staff parks here for nothing. I don't like it. And because Timmins, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay does it, we better do it too. But each location, there's different circumstance. I've tried to park in Sudbury near the City Hall, unless it's changed. I haven't been there for a while. It's not easy. It's not easy to do that. So each place is different. In North Bay, they said, no, we're not doing it. So just because everybody's doing it, whether there's contractual complications or not, I think staff's going to say, hey, why? Nobody's come forward ever to me and say, we got too much free parking here. We need to bring in every dollar that we can. Is it worth the aggravation trying to implement it? And who's monitoring and who's operating and what will the charge be? And the full-time, the part-time, the staff people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a nightmare not worth the upset or the aggravation that it will bring. It is very, very, I think, will be divisive. But again, I think people will say, yeah, you need to do that. And I'm sure Councillor Shoemaker has every positive intent about this. We need the money, it's difficult. But there are other ways, I think, bringing into the overall, not always talking about budget and money. I think staff this is going to impact morale, let there be no doubt. And we have trouble right now in keeping employees. They're talking to Mr. Girardi today, talking about street cleaning and saying, welcome. Well, anyway, that's irrelevant. And we started talking about staffing and so on. So we're having a heck of a time keeping staff. Where are they going? They're going to SR, they're going to Tenaris, they're going to a whole lot of places, which is good news for those folks and the people who are getting employment at other places. They're making better wages at other places. So now we're going to say to all of our staff, we're going to put a parking fee as well onto it. So I think it'll come back to us in spades, positive spades. Better say, come back to us in hearts. The staff will say, thanks for not doing this. It is simply not worth what you're going to try to put us all through. All that glitters is not gold, and this one isn't gold. And I asked somebody today, I said, who said it's easy to do the popular thing, but not always the right thing? Surprised the heck out of me that Albert Einstein said that, but he was, I understand, a fairly smart guy. At any rate, I don't think I've made a very good case, but I just say, hey, not necessary. Really not necessary. We're going through all kinds of difficulties now, but I think all of us see, hey, there's something at the end. It's coming to fruition. We're starting to do better. A lot of people say, no, I don't think so. But really, there are good things coming to Sault Ste. Marie, and this is no addition to anything positive for anybody. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hupinen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just say that Councillor Shoemaker is actually looking out for the taxpayers, and in the end, it's the taxpayers' dollars that we're looking at. And yes, there will be work involved, and yes, I agree that it should be tweaked, but that's what we do. We're here to do that. I have a business, I have a small business, I pay for my staff's parking, but it's my company that's paying that, not not the taxpayers. So I totally support the motion, and I think it should be tweaked. I think it's a good idea, and so be it if other cities are doing it. We could call them and find out what they do and how does it work. So, you know, it is very complicated, and I agree with Councillor Nero, but I think we should keep it on the table and see what we can do with it. So I definitely support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Just a couple of points just to reiterate. Fact, we just said a couple minutes ago that other businesses, including my colleague here, around the downtown area, either pay for their employees or basically staff are just not charged. Fact, we have serious revenue leakage in City Hall. And if we are trying to seek ways to create revenue, this is not the way. I would like to see staff's energy to be invested into other areas that's going to give us a better return and where it won't affect our staff morale. And I can give you a list of 6 quick, easy revenue leakages that we can invest our time and start to reverse them. And for example, simple, the Pine Street Marina, people are launching their boats down there. They're not paying to launch. That's simple, that's small, but I can give you a whole list. So in fact, we have other revenue leakage that we should be working on trying to recover. Fact, our staff that work for us are already taxpayers. Fact, rather than fact, when I was at the hospital here in Sault, Canada, part-time staff paid for parking. That's a fact. So what I'm trying to reiterate, if we're going to do this, we have to be equal to not just the downtown staff, but to all our staff members across the city, part-time and full-time. So again, I look at other models, and the hospital do charge full and part-time staff. And actually, I believe they also charge volunteers. Fact. Will there be a chance that staff members will be able to opt out of this program or not? Fact, if they do opt out, there is a good chance our partners, our property partners close to us, may all of a sudden have staff parking in their parking lots, creating some congestion in our partners close to us. Fact, we have to maintain, I heard tonight, we have to maintain our parking lots anyway, even if we had staff paying or not. It's our responsibility. So looking at these facts, I think there has to be more work done on this, but for now, I'd rather see our staff invest their energy into some more serious revenue incentives, revenue leakages, so I will not be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally understand where Councillor Shoemaker is why he is bringing this forward, but I have a real hard time trying to vote for this because regarding fairness. And when I did speak to Mr. Vare, he has staff that work off-site, away from the downtown area. I just find it's not fair that you're charging somebody that works in the downtown area and someone that doesn't. But I think it's a great exercise. Councillor Shoemaker has brought it forward. I do agree with Councillor Nero when he said a committee should be set up, a committee that is made up of management, staff, and even a few taxpayers on the committee. And then maybe more dialogue and maybe something that would be fair to everybody. And as Councillor Hollingsworth stated, part-time people do pay. And so, you know, why are we kind of going different directions? But Councillor Shoemaker has brought a good point up, and I'm fine with that. But I think fairness is lacking here. And one way to do it is by setting up a committee. Thanks.
Any other comments on this motion? I was just going to give you my comments there, Councillor Shoemaker, before we get to the recorded vote. I'm kind of one fundamental difficulty with the motion itself, and that I understand, and I think you can make a distinction between students and full-time staff, and I think you can make a distinction between part-time staff and full-time staff, because one car would be in the lot for a lot longer time than the other car would be in the lot. I don't think you can make a distinction between staff that work downtown and staff that work elsewhere. I think that's an inequity that's a bridge too far, and I couldn't support the motion in that respect. But there's a larger kind of issue from my perspective, and there's a lot of talk about public sector, and I know the public sector obviously is very different than private sector, but we often say we want the public sector to work like the private sector. So why does the private sector often pay for their staff's parking? I know why I do it. I know why I pay for the parking for the people that come every day to work at my office to generate, revenues and to make my business succeed. I pay for it so that they have a spot, so that it's convenient, and so that they feel like they're valued. So, if we want to see the private sector, the public sector work like the private sector, we have to think about some of those things. I think one of the difficulties with this resolution is that these lots are going to be maintained in any event. So the staff are a very incremental cost to these lots. If you look at just the south lot here, we need to clean it. We need to keep snow out of it. We need to keep the lines in the ground, independent of whether we let staff park in that lot or not. So I appreciate and respect your desire to do something with the report, because the report came back. But sometimes the report comes back and it gives us information, and we think about that information to determine that the right course of action is not to move forward with something. And at this point in time, in the here and now, I think the right course of action is to accept the report, to recognize there's a lot of information there to deal with, but also to recognize that we have this council, you folks, me included, we've driven a lot of change in the last few years. We've driven a lot of budgeting change. We've done a lot of spending change. We've frozen our staff salary. We've driven a lot of change through the staff, and it has been challenging for the staff. I don't know if there's been another council in the city's history that's talked about spending as frequently as we have, and has been as engaged in the budgeting as engaged we have been. And I do believe it's time, I think as Councillor Butland was alluding to really focus on some development, and to focus on building, and to focus on initiatives that will engage the staff and improve morale. So I think there are some fundamental challenges with the motion, but I also think we really need to focus on looking ahead and being really positive, because we are turning the corner. There's a lot of good things happening, and we want to capitalize on those things and get our staff really engaged and working. So for those reasons, I wouldn't support the motion at this time. Councillor Shoemaker's asked for a recorded vote.
Councillor Turco.
Against.
Councillor Fada.
For.
Councillor Kompadich.
Against.
Councillor Hoopinen.
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Against.
Councillor Grandinetti.
For.
Councillor Shoemaker.
For.
Councillor Nero.
Against.
Councillor Bruni.
Against.
Councillor Butland.
Against.
Mayor Provenzano.
Against. The motion fails.
7-4, the motion fails.
Madam Clerk, we can move on.
Under agenda item 7.8, boards and committees. Agenda item 7.8.1.1, the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library Board, a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth, resolved that Aaron Ferlano be appointed to the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library Board from May 28, 2018 to December 31, 2018.
Any discussion or questions on this matter, Council? It's 7.8.1.1, Sault Ste. Marie Public Library Board. Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
The Municipal Heritage Committee appointment is to be performed by bylaw, and that appears under the bylaw section appointing Sarah McCleary.
Any questions on 7.8.1.2, Council? Seeing none, we'll review that in bylaws. We've done 7.8.2, so we're moving on to 8, and we'll move on to motion 8.1, Councillor Hollingsworth and Bruni's motion. Clerk?
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni, whereas the city has been working on developing a comprehensive community project, Future SSM, to support the community as it progresses towards an economically diverse, culturally vibrant, socially equitable, and environmentally sustainable future. And whereas a number of individuals have been vigorously creating the plan by holding focus groups. And whereas the Future SSM project is to set clear steps as one important method to think beyond specific sector needs and address urgent issues for the entire local economy, including community infrastructure, social development, labor force development, education and training development, and business retention and expansion. And whereas this is critical to the future of our community, now therefore be it resolved that the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services be requested to provide quarterly updates to keep Council and the community abreast of the progress being made by the committees and individuals involved.
Go ahead, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Not much more to add because I think the resolution is very clear, but if I may say, we have mentioned over and over again that we are working very hard on our future. And just keeping everyone abreast about the plans, keeping it in the forefront, I think, is just a reinforcement that we are concerned and we want to have the best future for our community. And so having frequent updates, I think, is our responsibility to our constituents, to our city. And through this resolution is one way that we can make sure that this information is given and potentially having our citizens potentially come back with other feedback. So,
listen, I think it's a great resolution. We want to bring you a report where I think we'll have a pretty substantial report we'll be able to bring you by the end of June, or latest first meeting, the meeting in July, but likely the end of June. And I think you'll see a lot of great news on the front with respect to this project. We have some great news coming out on NHFC, and we're very positive and hopeful we'll have some great news coming out of FedNor. So we will be happy to bring you a report, probably last meeting in June at the latest, So last meeting in June.
and then onward quarterly.
Yeah, that's absolutely no problem.
Okay.
All in favor? Carried.
Agenda item 8.2, a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Grandinetti, whereas Sault Ste. Marie's current inventory of multi-residential, social and community housing is at or near capacity, and whereas studies show that mixed income housing is the most inclusionary way to develop multi-residential, social and community housing, and whereas Sault Ste. Marie's current inventory of multi-residential, social and community housing has limited mixed income availability, and whereas on April 30, 2018, the governments of Canada and Ontario signed a 10-year funding agreement under the National Housing Strategy that will see $4.2 billion invested in social and community housing across Ontario. And whereas the National Housing Strategy funding might present an opportunity for Sault Ste. Marie to increase capacity in its multi-residential and mixed-income social and community housing inventory. Now, therefore, be it resolved that city staff coordinate with Sault Ste. Marie Social Services to determine where new social and community housing can be developed, what resources are available to assist in the development of said housing, and what role the city can play in ensuring availability of property for the development of such housing, including whether any property needs to be acquired and or rezoned for the development of such housing.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a motion that was sprung on by an announcement I saw that the provincial and federal governments had come to a national housing strategy agreement that set aside $4.2 billion for the development of social housing in Ontario. So obviously Ontario is going to have a lot of needs, and I want to make sure that Sault Ste. Marie gets their fair share of the provincial funding, the provincial and federal funding, I should say, and to make sure that we have our names on the list when the time comes for this funding to be distributed. So I spoke with Mr. Nadeau, ran this resolution by him. He helped me by tweaking it in a couple of minor ways, and I appreciate his involvement. And I'm hopeful that we will see a plan come forward that will see more social housing units built in Sault Ste. Marie.
I think it's a great resolution. Councillor Hollingsworth.
My question has been answered. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hupinen, then Fada.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be a good idea to have Mr. Nadeau come to council to present any information he has regarding the funding that's been provided?
Well, I think that would happen essentially as a result of this motion.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
We're going to Councillor Fata, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Just curious, Mr. Mayor, whether to get this kind of funding, whether we have to be shovel-ready, or is it something where we can apply for it and then take the steps necessary? I'm just wondering, like, how the process would work, if anybody knows.
Well, I don't, this is just getting to staff now. We have to pass the resolution, then they'll work with Mr. Nadeau to see what the process looks like and what we have to do.
Yeah.
Councillor Hollingsworth, you want to speak to...
Just for clarification, a request has been sent to Mr. Nadeau, I believe, and he was, I believe, was supposed to be coming tonight, so it's already on the agenda review for him to be coming shortly.
Okay. So, very good motion, Councillor Shoemaker. I think it's a really good project. It's something that we should be working on with the DSAP. So, all in favor? Carried. 8.3.
Motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Nero, whereas opioid and other illicit drug use is a significant public health issue in communities across Canada, including the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And whereas the health harms of illicit drug use include not only addiction and overdose, but also an increased risk of bloodborne infections. And whereas Algoma has a high burden of hepatitis C, a bloodborne infection which is strongly linked to injection drug use based on information presented by the Sault Ste. Marie Area Drug Strategy. And whereas per provincial data visualized by the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Centre, the level of overdoses in this area suggests it may benefit from accessible harm reduction services such as needle exchange. And whereas on April 23, 2018, the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie committed to continuing to work with and support the collective efforts of Algoma Leadership Table, Sault Area Hospital, Group Health Centre, Algoma Public Health, Sault Ste. Marie Police Service, and the Drug Strategy Committee to collectively address the opioid crisis and its consequences. And whereas the Algoma Leadership Table is currently conducting an assessment of the needs and programming available in the community to determine where resources should be focused, and whereas the assessment by the Algoma Leadership Table will review the needs and programming not just in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, but across the District of Algoma. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Sault Ste. Marie requests that City staff work with the Algoma Leadership Table and engage other community partners as necessary to assess the need for harm reduction and health equity services, specifically in Jamestown, in addition to the current needs assessment being undertaken by the Algoma Leadership Table, and report back to Council. And further be it resolved that City staff work with the Algoma Leadership Table and other community partners as necessary to provide Council with an estimate of the cost for the establishment of said Harm Reduction and Health Equity Centre.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A more technical resolution than I usually draft, but that is because I did it in consultation with folks who are much smarter than I am at Algoma Public Health. So I had obviously, we all saw the W5 documentary that showed Jamestown and showed the negative consequences of drug use in Jamestown. And Councillor Butland and I recently had the opportunity to go and visit the soup kitchen and discuss with people what they want to see in the area. And that, in addition to some data that was provided by the Innovation Centre that showed the rate of bloodborne illnesses in this area as being much higher than elsewhere in the city, and the rate of opioid use being much higher in this area than elsewhere in the city. My initial idea was simply to establish a needle exchange program in this area to hopefully reduce the instances of bloodborne illness. But in consultation with Algoma Public Health, they suggested that that's simply one issue in the area. Really, there is a bigger issue in the area of folks are at a distinct disadvantage in healthcare there. So to bring them, and the word is health equity, to bring them, the folks in the area, to a level playing field in terms of health equity, so that they are starting from the same point as folks elsewhere in the city. And I know that the Algoma Leadership Table is conducting an assessment of the needs across the district, but I think the idea behind this motion, and Councillor Nero seconded it, and we had many discussions about it, is we want to see something in this area. Whatever it is up to, the Algoma Leadership Table and staff to work together on developing. But we want, separate and apart from whatever they're going to come up with for the district, unless that center intends to be in Jamestown, we would like to see something specific to Jamestown, either what they're currently working on or in addition to what the Algoma Leadership Table is working on. So we also want to know, obviously, what the budget would be for such a health equity center. Councillor Butland and I, again, went there last week, and there's certainly no shortage of space available to put a center there. It would, I think, be akin to a neighborhood resource center, but perhaps more health-oriented than police services oriented. And I know that the Neighborhood Resource Center obviously has a health service aspect to it, but I think it's spearheaded. It would be fair to say I think it's spearheaded by police services, and I would envision that this would be more of a health center than anything related to police services. So, although there may be a police services aspect within it. So anyways, it is a motion to bring forward a plan, hopefully for the Jamestown area to have a health equity center so that we can help improve the lot of the folks in the area. And I hope the council will pass it unanimously, obviously.
I really think that it is very similar to the Neighborhood Resource Center. There are far more health partners engaged in the Neighborhood Resource Center than any other type of partners. So, there's a physician there, and there's all kinds of our community partners that are in the healthcare field, whether it's mental health or personal health, that are engaged in that. The police are just one presence there, but it certainly is really a healthcare focus. But I can certainly support this motion. I think it's worth looking at. I can tell you that the Algoma Leadership Table is very close to having an FTE, a full-time equivalent, which is a thank you to this group for supporting that. When we went through the Community Adjustment Committee process, one of the things that we determined was that there was a lot of great work being done through the Algoma Leadership Table, but there was nobody there at the Algoma Leadership Table to actually be accountable and take away and do some of the achievables. You have a lot of the leadership in the community there, but nobody that they can task with that work to move projects ahead, and they made it very clear to us that they need some help with that. And it was one of the recommendations that came out of the Community Adjustment Committee, and it was recommendations that you folks supported, and we are very close to having that person there. So that person there, along with a recent hire that will be working with the Drug Strategy Committee on a full-time basis. There are people now to do a lot of this work, Councillor Shoemaker, with city staff. So I think we'll see some positive progress. We've got some structure in place that we didn't have in place 2 months ago, is in place now. And I think it could lead to some really productive and positive outcomes. And I get the intent of this motion. If the work that we're doing ends up looking at something in Jamestown, great. If it doesn't end up looking at something in Jamestown, you want that to be considered also and not brought back. And I understand that, and I think that's positive. Councillor Butland?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, good resolution, easily supportive. What Councillor Shoemaker didn't say is that we visited the soup kitchen, and that day they had a flood, so lunch was canceled on that particular day, but we did get to speak to, say, 15 or 20 people as opposed to probably 75 or 100 that we would have been able to. But there, again, I push this, they're very forthcoming, and they had a lot of, I think, positive suggestions. So we're bringing resolutions forward, and they're all good. And when I did a drive around beforehand, I came down pretty hard last time and say, boy, this is a stark concrete jungle. There are some people who are looking after their houses there very, very well. I'm sure they're very proud. I'm saying, can we not make a start? Because some of these developments are going to cost a whole lot of money, and they're complicated and so on. But the aesthetics of the place is quite depressing. While we were there, the PUC was there probably for the second time in 6 months because the light standard was knocked down by somebody. I said, well, who knocks? The PUC is there for a day or two. I said, who knocks these down? Well, in the winter, it may be Public Works, or it might be a gas service, or whoever. But this is a regular occurrence. But it's so stark. We wouldn't have to spend a whole lot of money just to bring it alive. There's no color, it's just gray, gray, gray. And I think the people would be very happy to involve themselves in this and willing, and they would feel a partner in this area, which is so sadly lacking. Now, people say, well, you're concentrating only on Jamestown. But we have spent a lot of money on other areas of the city, downtown, and we're not finished yet. But move a little bit west, not spend a whole lot of money. But there are some things that we can do rather inexpensively, just to, hey, spruce it up. And I think Mr. Spadoni and Mr. Matheson would be willing partners with us. So good resolution. I hope we can do other things rather immediately rather than in the long term. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else? Councillor Fada?
This is a question. When I'm looking at this resolution and I'm thinking who would spearhead this type of project, and my first thoughts would be the Ministry of Health. This is a provincial jurisdiction. So I asked myself, like, what role do the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie play in this? If this thing carries on and it works out and we do build something in that part of the city, seeing as we already have agencies that we already that are already paid for by taxpayers, i.e. police, Algonquin Public Health. In terms of the actual operation, the actual structure, and the ongoing expenses, I'd be curious to know if it can be said through this resolution before I vote on it. Like, what percentage would be acceptable that the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie would be putting forth towards this venture? Can you, can someone, Councillor Shoemaker, can?
Well, right now, Councillor Fada, there is all of the people that would be participating in this work are all people that, we're already paying. So there'll be no incremental cost there. We would be working with our provincial partners, who you referred to develop a plan. So, I don't think anybody's in a position to say right now, this is what it looks like and this is what it'll cost the different parties. But we're not going to go out and start administering healthcare. And that's not what the motion directs here. What the motion does is it says, look, we have an area of our community that has challenges, and we want city staff to work with the relevant parties to bring back a plan to address those challenges. I think that's a municipal role. It's not a municipal role to administer healthcare, I completely agree that. But it's a municipal role to bring people together, and it's a municipal role to identify challenges in our community and have people work together to address those challenges. Right now, it's not costing us anything, and it can't cost us anything until it comes back to this group, and this group makes decisions about what it is or isn't comfortable spending. At that point, I think you'd be in a concrete position to say, I think that is an appropriate municipal expenditure, or I don't think that's an appropriate municipal expenditure. But right now, it'd just be a hypothetical discussion.
Just one final comment, if I may. I think there seems to be, and I'm not an expert on this, okay, so there seems to be a understanding or misunderstanding that if we solve the problem in Jamestown, we've solved maybe 85% of the drug problems in Sault Ste. Marie.
No one has said that, Councillor.
No, I think there may be an assumption.
You might misunderstand it, but
W5 seems to indicate.
Nobody in this, Councillor Fada, nobody in this chamber has said that. You might misunderstand that, but it is not a discussion we had.
No, I'm just saying that there may be this perception out there, maybe not by the members of this council, that Jamestown is the heart of the problem, and if we solve Jamestown, we'll solve a good percentage of the problem, of the drug problem in Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay. Any other comments on this motion? All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried.
Under agenda item 8.4, a motion by councillors Nero and Shoemaker, whereas City Council recently passed a motion requesting city staff to address actions required to ensure compliance of properties in the Jamestown area with the minimum standards and dirty yard bylaws. And whereas the intent would be to initiate the findings of said request in the Jamestown area and subsequently address all other areas of the city as required. And whereas the minimum standards and dirty yard bylaws do not address the problem of property owners discarding unwanted items, garbage, and debris into city-owned laneways. And whereas the city bylaw enforcement officer cannot issue a violation notice to a property owner without proof that the items were actually placed into the city laneway by that property owner. And whereas Public Works and Engineering Services does not generally pick up discarded items, debris, and garbage from an unmaintained laneway, and that each situation may require its own investigation. And whereas it is not in the city's best interest to leave this debris and garbage to accumulate in city laneways, now therefore be it resolved that Public Works and Engineering Services, the Legal Department, and the Building Division investigate the problem of discarded items, debris, and garbage being placed in city laneways by property owners and report back to Council with a solution on how to keep the city laneways clean. And be it further resolved that the said report include the cost estimate of keeping laneways clean from debris and garbage, and ways of recovering costs from property owners who are found to be in violation of the practice of placing debris and garbage in city laneways.
Okay, Councilor Nero. Can I have Councilor Nero's mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brought this up at the last meeting that I would be bringing this forward today. And the intent of the motion is to address the gap that we have in some of the things that are being discarded throughout the city. The most important part of this is the sixth whereas, where right now we're caught between the building department not being able to issue a violation because they can't prove who in fact put the debris or unwanted items into the laneway. Our Public Works does maintain some laneways, but some aren't. It's an individual basis that they're looked at. And I don't think the answer is just to leave it there. We're in between. We can't address it through our building department. We can't address it through our Public Works. So we need to sit down, I think, and have our staff look at what we're going to do with this, because the answer is not, let's just close our eyes and it stays there, because other residents will look at that and say, you know what, this is a very economical way to get rid of my debris. I'm just going to put it into the laneway. So I'm asking for a cost to come back. I know that's going to be difficult. I don't want to imply through the resolution that I want our Public Works to go into a full-fledged cleaning of laneways as a budgetary item. But it has to be, I would suggest, on an ad-need basis, that this debris just can't be left there because it just keeps accumulating. So that's the intent of the resolution. The first whereas, yes, I do suggest that we start in Jamestown, and I suggest that because I look at the calls that I get, and I have to start where I get the most calls. So,
and Jamestown happens to be in your ward.
It just happens to be my ward. It happens to be where the calls are coming from. But I want to qualify that by saying, and I said this last week, we want to start there, but we need to go throughout the city, because I have other areas that are just as bad as the Jamestown area for calls. And these are laneways, and people just, I don't know if it's because they don't have the means to get rid of this stuff to the landfill. They don't have the transportation to get it there. So I don't know why, but I don't think that we should just turn our eyes and leave it there.
Councilor Grandinetti?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just through you to Mr. Girardi. It states here from an unmaintained laneway, and everything seems to surround the Jamestown area lately. From my experience working on homes in that area, those laneways, are they unmaintained or maintained? Because most houses there have access through the laneway to their homes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Grandinetti, specifically, I don't know which ones, unless I look on the map, are maintained and non-maintained. We have maintained and non-maintained throughout the whole city. But I do think what has to be specifically stated is you're not looking at having the laneways maintained by grass cutting and everything else. It's just the garbage discarded. And I also have that same fear, as you mentioned. Once we start cleaning up the garbage, that'll be a common place for people to throw garbage. So yes, it's going to take some thought, and I do understand that We can't just leave it there, but I think the process is actually in place. If the building department determines that they can't find out who owns it, they can contact Public Works, and Public Works should be able to remove the material. It all depends on how much is put there and the extent of it, because we've had some properties within the city where we've had to hire a contractor because they're so significant that we didn't have the manpower to manage it. So I think we need to look at this a little bit further, but I'm glad to see with the shake of your head that you're not asking us to go around cutting the grass and maintaining it to that level. It's strictly removing garbage materials that have been dumped there by some residents, correct?
Yeah, so I thought that there was something in place that Public Works does go pick up garbage, because it's happened to me in my ward on a couple streets, and within a couple days the mattresses actually they were gone.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Grandelli, we do have litter pickup. Yeah. We have a truck that runs around town, picks up, depending on dead animals, picks up mattresses that have been thrown off of vehicles or that come off vehicles, and whatever other material that might end up on the roadway, on the streetways. We don't go checking through every laneway.
I'm just looking at this resolution as a waste of time, for staff's time, and bringing something back to council when there's already something in place for staff to go pick up the garbage that's discarded in laneways or on the side of roads or stuff.
Well, you could vote, no, sorry, Councillor, no. You could vote against it then, Councillor Grandinetti. I think the spirit of the resolution,
Mr. Girardi,
which I completely agree with, is that the city has to we have laneways. When there are laneways, when it's our property, we can't just leave things be. Like, we have to go there and we have to clean it up. We have to take responsibility for it. And I understand it's unfortunate, because then maybe it would encourage more discarding of refuse, but we can't leave garbage on city property. So in that respect, I support the motion. I think it's something that we should send to Public Works and you can take a look at and send back to us. Councillor Butland?
Yes, supportive of what you said. How serious is the problem? Could we not make one sweep throughout the city with our truck and a couple of folks and just say, hey, it's very serious, somewhat serious, or not all that bad? Could we not do that? I don't know how many laneways there are in the city.
Councillor Butland, certainly the opportunity is there. I mean, if someone sees it, you call dispatch, we create a work order. That's the process, and that'll establish how much there is. How many calls we get will tell you how much garbage is being left around in laneways. So it can be handled by whoever identifies that there is garbage in a laneway. Just contact 759-5201. We'll create the work order, and then we'll look into it. But again, when you have someone abusing, say, an existing system, you need to involve the building department. The building department has to have a part in this, because they have to determine if someone is doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And if they are, then we move forward and remove the material.
Councillor Hupinen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is for whoever thinks they can answer it, but in the olden days, we used to have once a year garbage pickup, and it was great for a lot of the folks that didn't have a trailer to get to the dump, or they didn't have trucks, and everybody put their garbage out and it was all cleaned up. Would that help with this at all?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hupinen, that was spring cleanup. That was eliminated many years ago. Then we had the free week at the dump, and council, I think you were on this, council at the time, also had made the decision to not proceed and continue on with the free week at landfill. I don't think the people who are throwing this garbage in there would fall into that category anyway. I don't think they're the ones that would bring it to the front or bring it to the landfill. I think this material that's being discarded is being discarded by people who are just not caring where they throw the garbage.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Girardi, but I'm thinking further back when we used to have, Mr. Butland might remember, because
it was spring
we're
cleanup.
Probably about the same age. But there used to be a pickup where people could put their garbage out curbside, and it would be a spring cleanup where they could get rid of all of the stuff that they cannot get to the garbage dumps themselves.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hupinen, as I mentioned, that was called spring cleanup, and people would put their stuff in front. Then the city would pick it all up.
Once a year.
Then the council of the day decided that that wasn't cost effective, eliminated it. They put in place the free week. Then this council had made the choice to discontinue that And now we're at the point where you can bring it up to the landfill, pay the tipping fees.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in this motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Nero, whereas bicycling is more than a practical, cost-effective solution to many municipalities, and whereas it is an opportunity to provide an inexpensive activity for families and individuals that provides exercise and adds to the quality life that is important to our community. And whereas, as a community, it is critical to identify and respond to initiatives that improve cycling in and around our city, promoting safety. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor be requested to write a support letter to accompany the grant application being completed by the Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan Economic Development Corporation for bike racks for the international bus.
Councillor Hollingsworth, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you wanted to...
I'd like to spend an hour on this.
Please not. You actually have a 5-minute limit. I'm gonna enforce it on this motion.
I'm just teasing you. It is very straightforward. The bottom line is, I think, in all fairness, Mayor, you have been very good at promoting partnerships with our fellow council across the river. And this is another example of a partnership where we show our support, and in the future they show their support for initiatives that we work on. So long story short, they are applying for some grant money through the state of Michigan to improve biking across the international bridge, plus bike racks on the bus itself. So it's as simple as that. They're asking us for a support letter, and it just reinforces the cycle-friendly Twin Cities philosophy.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. I'll write the letter.
Under agenda item 8.6, the Huron Central Railway, Councillor Christian is ill. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bruni. Motion by Councillors Butland and Bruni, whereas City Council passed a resolution on April 24, 2017, supporting the efforts of the Huron Central Railway to secure the funding necessary to enable the railway between Sault Ste. Marie and the CPR connection in Sudbury to continue to provide a short line freight service. And whereas Genesee and Wyoming, Canada have recently announced they will suspend operations of the Huron Central Railway between Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury by the end of 2018 due to a lack of funding from senior levels of government to maintain the railway. And whereas in 2009, in similar circumstances, the City of Sault Ste. Marie facilitated a task force consisting of industry stakeholders and chaired by then CAO Joe Fertese, which was instrumental in enabling the Huron Central Railway to receive significant funding from the federal and provincial governments to rehabilitate the infrastructure along the Sault Ste. Marie to Sudbury rail corridor. Now, therefore, be it resolved that City Council endorse a new task force led by Councillor Steve Butland and Joe Fertese, and including all relevant stakeholders, to assist the Huron Central Railway to obtain senior government funding to ensure the continued operation of the railway.
So I'm going to speak to this motion before I pass it over to Councillor Butland. I got a heads up that Huron Central would be making this announcement. Obviously, there are a number of jobs in our community, and that rail line is important to some of our industries, so they didn't want the city to be taken by surprise. So when I received the heads up, I reflected on it. And we often look back at things that didn't work when we want to improve or correct things. At the same time, we should look back at things that did work and learn from those also. So when I was reflecting on this and what we could do, I naturally looked back on what we did last time. And as a result of that, I called Councillor Butland, and I suggested to him that maybe we should put together a very similar task force. And I had the occasion about 3 or 4 months ago to be talking to Mr. Fertese, and he indicated to me that if there was anything he could ever be involved in, he would certainly like that, because he certainly wanted to try and help the city if he could. So I had called Councillor Butland, and I ran the idea by him, and he thought it was a good idea, and he thought it was something he would like to be involved in. And I called Mr. Fertese and ran the idea by him, and he thought it was something that he'd like to be involved in. And I had a conversation with the CEO of the company, who was excited to have the municipality's support. He thanked me to the support we had given him to date, and he too referenced the success that we had the last time we went down this road, and was glad to see that we would offer the same type of assistance. So with that, we drafted this motion, And I thank Councillor Christian and Councillor Butland for putting their names on it. In the end, I think what we're going to try and do is exactly what we did last time. And we're going to try and make the case to our other levels of government that we require support here, and that this rail line is important to our community economically and socially. And I'm glad to have Steve's support and assistance in this, and I'm glad to have Joe Fortese's support and assistance in this. And I think the two of them and the task force they'll assemble and the group of people they'll put together will be successful and productive. And I'd indicated to both of them that I would support the project and do whatever they required of me as the mayor. So I think it's a good motion, and I think it's good to take another run at this the way we did last time. Councillor Butland?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And this was initiated by the mayor. I know it created a bit of a buzz. They said, well, you know, what's happening here? And Mr. Fortese said, point out that I just want to do this for the city. I'm not getting paid to do it. And he had success along with the task force and the people down the line last time around. So can we duplicate it? I sincerely hope so. And some of the naysayers are getting to me and say, well, no, the taxpayers can't subsidize the private railway yet again. And the bottom line is we'll certainly ask Huron Central to come to the table. In fact, they've been very forthcoming to this point in time. We're scheduled 5 meetings in the next couple of days, so there is activity. You say, why? Because we have 50 employees locally. Domtar and Ecom have paper mills in Nairn Center and Espanola, absolutely essential to those towns' existence. And in the case of SR, important to the city of Sault Ste. Marie, 7,400 rail cars per year go out of Algoma. And without the railway, you'll put probably double that number of big trucks on the road. So it'll be more costly. You say, well, the taxpayers can't subsidize this. If we don't subsidize the railway, we'll be subsidizing highway infrastructure, and the environment will be worse off because of the multi-trucks and safety, et cetera, et cetera. So no doubt there'll be a comprehensive report coming. I appreciate the support of the mayor. I don't know if we'll have a task force per se, but we're going to certainly meet with each and every stakeholder. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Excellent work. I support this, obviously, from an economic perspective in our future. We always have to keep our eyes on the future. If this ever dies, who knows what type of damage we might be doing in our future when it comes to the economy. We always pride ourselves trying to attract businesses here that we have a railroad, that we have highways, that we have shipping and waterways. So again, kudos to you, Mayor, kudos to you, Councillor Butland, for working towards this, because we don't want to lose this at all. It will be detrimental to our future.
Councillor Fada.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just have a question, I guess. In 2009 was the last time that the group met, and the upper levels of government gave the railway approximately 30.5 million.
It was certainly in that neighborhood.
I just find it frustrating to think that every 9 years they may come back for 30-some million dollars, or perhaps more with inflation.
This isn't coming from our level of government. We're not making a financial.
No, I'm just saying that it's very unfortunate that 9 years later the taxpayers are being asked to continue giving this railway money. If the 30.5 million didn't take care of the infrastructure, then I guess I'm not familiar with what it costs to do the infrastructure for this railway between the Sault and Sudbury. So now 9 years later, they're coming back for more. It's very unfortunate.
Well, then you can vote against the resolution.
No, well, I'm not against
Well, it sounds like you are.
I'm just very concerned that a railway would come back 9 years later and ask the taxpayers to give them more funds. This is just unfortunate. That's all.
Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Butland hit the point well. And what was sort of left unsaid is that, you know, if we're not trying to seek out federal and provincial government help for this railway in one way, there is going to be further cost for, you know, road infrastructure and all that. He did say that. What he didn't say is I think the belief in the community and perhaps the light at the end of the tunnel is that Algoma is on its way to exiting from CCAA. And this would throw a wrench in the Algoma's plans. I have to believe it would, not that I have any knowledge that it would, but I have to believe that this would throw a wrench in Algoma's plans for any future costs that they're going to incur to ship their product to market. So, you know, we have our biggest employer that relies on this railway to get their product eastbound. So we have to do everything we can to try and support Algoma at this critical time. It's a critical time for Algoma because they're just, it seems, on their way out of CCAA, hopefully the very near future, and to have an entity like this that supplies a service to them go down at this time it would create a undesirable difficulty.
Algoma would use a lot more trucks. There would be a lot more trucks leaving the city with steel on.
And of course, the cost of shipping by truck is known to be higher than the cost of shipping by rail. So, you know, I don't think it's just that they'd be using more trucks. I think it's that they'd be spending more to ship their product.
Councillor Kropotich.
One last comment, just to mention that I totally support the resolution. I mean, this kind of service for our municipality and the surrounding area is critical for the movement of goods in and out of our community. So I think it's a great resolution, and I certainly support it. And I wish you well, Councillor Butland and Mr. Fratesi as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So, any more other comments? All in favor? Resolution's carried. Who is the acting mayor for this month? Councillor Grandinetti, can you just give me a washroom break, please? It's been, I moved yet. I didn't think we'd be going still.
A motion by Councillor Shoemaker and Hollingsworth, whereas on February 20, 2018, staff brought forward a report to City Council about more than $500,000 of provincial funding for the City of Sault Ste. Marie has through the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program, OMCCP, and whereas staff were not directed at that time to bring forward project recommendations for the use of said provincial funding. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to bring forward to City Council recommendations on projects to use the funding available through the OMCCP.
Any comments, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor and Councillor Hollingsworth for seconding this motion. We had a report, what was it, 4 or 5 months ago, 3 months ago, that said that the provincial government, you know, has surprised us, I suppose, with this extra funding for the Ontario Municipal Commuter Recycling Program. And at the time we said, that's great. We love that we got the extra funding. And that was the end of it. We didn't direct staff to do anything with it. So this is sort of a bit of a procedural housekeeping matter. Let's get our staff looking at how we can use the provincial money. It's not our own money. It's $500 in sort of extra provincial funding that's out there that we have access to. So let's use it. Let's either extend our bike lanes, extend our hub trail, extend our boardwalk, whatever we can do to get good municipal cycling infrastructure in place for the community.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor. Just reiterating what Councillor Shoemaker was saying, but with regards to cycling, as we move forward as a city, it seems that more and more people are fully understanding the benefits of cycling. But I do have a question for Mr. Vare. Can you just give us a brief update? I believe that we have been working on, or staff have been working on, looking at potentially some rental bicycling programs. And possibly, could that project be considered to fall under this funding?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we have been looking at some opportunities for bike share programs, and we've talked to a few different companies that have programs available, so we're investigating the costs and what would be involved there. I don't know for sure if this funding program can apply to those. I may defer that to my colleague. No. Yeah, so we're not sure if that could be applied. Our understanding initially was that it's for, the biking infrastructure, trails and lanes, et cetera, but we can look into that and find out if those costs can be covered.
Great. Second question. When you look into this, you're right, maybe the entire program cannot be covered, but you're very creative, your team's very creative in your thinking. Maybe there's some bits and pieces that might be able to fall under this umbrella just to get that ball rolling and keep our costs reduced when we start going out to our partners that we're interested in going this bike share program. Sure. Thank you.
Councillor Huppanen.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Through you to Mr. Elliott. I have a question about the Black Road work that's being done. Has there been consideration for cycle paths on that? That was asked of me over the weekend, and I told them I'd try to find out.
Mr. Acting Mayor to Councillor Huppanen, yes, there's cycling paved shoulders are being provided on the with a lane
Paved
marking for. We can decide later whether you're actually going to assign them as cycling lanes, but the facility will be there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Actually, I have one more final question. I'm going to direct this again to Mr. Vare. The master cycling plan, is that the correct terminology, or are we calling it the master movement plan, where we are looking at not just bicycling, but just movement on the hub trail? That's one, clarification. And two, the funding that we have received, is it just strictly for cycling, or is it to go with this master plan of, I can't remember the term that we use, movement.
Active transportation.
Thank you, active transportation. I know that as council, we've been trying to use those words versus just cycling, because we need to recognize that, yes, cycling is important, but active transportation is the better overall arching phrase.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, I'm going to defer that to Don McConnell, our Director of Planning.
Go ahead, Don.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, the cycling master plan is simply that. It is a cycling master plan. It is a not all-inclusive active transportation plan, although a lot of the work that we do does benefit all groups. And with regards to the infrastructure funding, it is dedicated to cycling facilities. And in particular, they're really pushing commuter cycling facilities, hence the name of the program, trying to get more people to cycle rather than basically to drive their cars. And as such, though, like the entire hub trail, which is technically, according to the ministry, a multi-use trail, a multi-use path, does support people other than cycling. That sort of development would be eligible under the funding. So there may be some benefit to other groups as well.
Great, thank you. And one final question. It sounds like we've clarified it, but it would not be used for bike racks on buses. That would not fall under the mandate.
I thought about that earlier tonight, Mr. Acting Mayor, and I'm going to have to report back on that. We're going to have to look at that. That's a possibility. Yeah.
Which possibly could be sooner than years from now.
Possibly.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions of council? Okay, I have one question, and either to Mr. McConnell or Mr. Vare. Could this money be used towards repairing the hub trail? There's certain sections on hub trail behind, I believe, Texas or Bennett Boulevard. I already see you say no.
To you, Mr. Acting Mayor, the funding is to create new infrastructure facilities and cannot be used for maintenance. They consider that part of ongoing municipal operations. So the idea is to create something new with the funding, not to repair existing.
Okay, so something like that, we'd have to bring it on with the council resolution next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I leave that to Mr. Girardi.
Mr. Girardi. Go ahead, Mr. Girardi.
It's you, to Acting Mayor Grandinetti. We already have a budget in place for doing repairs, so just have to indicate where the repairs are required. Now, come spring, at this time of year, We have our teams going out and inspecting, and all the areas that are in need of repair will get repaired.
I took some pictures yesterday morning.
If you'd forward them off, that would be good.
I will. It's just there's, I know this is off the topic a little, there's some sections that the roots from the trees are kind of raising the asphalt.
Right.
And what I'll do is I'll send the pictures to you tomorrow, and then we'll get the crews out to take a look at it.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Passed.
Okay, under agenda item 11, bylaws, a motion by councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date May 28, 2018 be approved, save and accept bylaw 2018-110.
Councillor Shoemaker, you had a question here?
Yes, I declared a conflict on the Fox Run report on the agenda, and it looks like there's actually a number of bylaws that go with it. So it's 11.1.5 I'm in conflict on, 11.1.8, which is a rezoning from last meeting, 11.1.9, 11.1.10, 11.1.11, and 11.1.13. So I think that is almost all the bylaws, so I'm just going to excuse myself for the bylaw portion.
I was going to make that exact suggestion to you.
So that I
and we only have one
facilitate the process.
So Councillor Shoemaker, because of the conflict he's already declared, is excusing himself from voting on the bylaws. All in favor? Carried.
Then I just have the one bylaw that Councillor Turco has declared a conflict on. A motion by Councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth resolved that bylaw 2018-110, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4001, parking on private property, be passed in open council this 28th day of May 2018.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 13, a motion by Councillors Spada and Hollingsworth resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss a proposed disposition of land. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution. That's section 239(2)C under the Municipal Act.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillors Spada and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.